English guests, I'm going to speak in English. Thank you very much for coming. I know that few of our other attendees are stuck in traffic because there's a construction, so please bear with us. This is not the majority of the attendees, so please bear with us. So let us pray in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Lord, open our lips and our minds and our hearts so we may receive your glory through the Holy Family, so that we know how to bring the light of Christ into our own families and ultimately light every candle in our world, so that your coming may be much more welcomed and fruitful. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you, Father Gabriel. Again, another welcome to our Holy Korean Martyrs Parish Advent Workshop. So this year we decided to do a workshop versus a retreat. So there's a little bit of difference, right? So and to focus on the domestic church, so which the guest speaker will talk about. So anyways, he'll tell you more about it instead of me. So before we get started, though, I want to invite everyone to move up front because the slides, some of the slides are a little bit difficult to see unless you have really good vision. Please, for your benefit later, to be able to see the slides. So please move up. So we're very fortunate to have exceptional guest speaker today. Dr. Robert Navarra is a licensed marriage family therapist and is a respected therapist who integrates faith, psychology, and practical tools for building healthy and loving relationships. So he has over 40 years of experience working with individuals and families and relationships, and he's currently an instructor at Santa Clara University. In graduate psychology, is a great graduate psychology program teacher, and he taught at 8 years at the St. Patrick's Seminary on pastoral counseling. And he's a certified Gottman therapist and an advanced trainer, and also enrolled as a certified confraternity of Our Lady of Sorrows. I think I got that right. So, and active member of his parish in
St. Charles.
St. Charles
San
in
Carlos.
San Carlos. Yes. So, without further ado, let's please welcome Dr. Navarra to the front. Please give it.
Thank you, Bernard. I appreciate it and feel very honored to be here today. So thank you so much for this invitation. And I want to extend appreciation to Bernard and the group, everyone who's involved in your group who's here. Could you just raise your hand? Don't stand up just for a second. I make you all embarrassed. Stand up just for a second. All right. There's a few outside. Okay. All righty. So let's express our appreciation. So God's designed for our family. What do we mean by family? Well, this is a family, right? We're part of the community and part of larger community of God's community. And so today's talk is going to be focusing on three talks, actually. Three different things, three different components. And so it's going to be looking at what are the challenges families face. So we're going to opportunity to explore some of that. And then some theology of the family. Now, I'm not a theologian, so I want to put a little disclaimer out there. But in preparing for this talk, I thought there were some major points that just needed to be underscored with some of the research I've done. So there's that. And then we're going to end with practical applications of the theology can be played out actually in very practical ways. So here's where that 40 plus years of experience working with couples and families, we know from research what predicts stability and what predicts instability. So the application of the theory, so to speak, in real life is also going to be played out with your partner, if you have a partner, with your family, and with the community, and with the Lord. So it's a model that can be translated into any loving, caring relationship. So that's where we're going to go. And what I want to do is add another prayer. And this is actually out of a prayer book of the Secular Servite Order, which I am very invested in and have felt called to that particular order as a secular person. And so I would like us to do another prayer to our Blessed Lady, because she's the one for us to keep our eyes on as well. As we're anticipating the arrival of our Lord, her fiat is an important part of that salvation history. So if we could pray together in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And this prayer literally is prayer to Virgin in our sanctuaries. And that's where we're at right now. O Mary, blessed of Most High and Mother of Grace, through you the Church lifts up her prayer of praise. Beloved daughter of the Father, by your acceptance of the word of the angel, you cooperated in the salvation of the world. For in you the creature once again obeys its Creator. Mother of Jesus, by pondering the word in your heart, you showed us the way to wisdom and opened to all people the same word of glad tidings. Spouse, beloved of the Spirit, by accepting the word of God, you have life to the world, and in you humanity has become the dwelling place of the divine. Loving Mother, woman of prayer, we turn to you and ask, support our prayers for ourselves, for all of your loving children, for our friends and families, for those who share Christian faith, and for every person on earth, that all may know peace and salvation. Ask the Father that we may truly know Christ, be filled with the gifts of the Spirit, protected in all adversity and freed from every evil. Help us to build God's kingdom, an everlasting kingdom of praise, justice, and peace. And we ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. All right. We're in good company. I'm famous for losing the little clicker. There we are. I found it. Yay. All right. So let's take a look at the opening prayer that we just did. I'm usually 1 or 2 slides behind what I present on. I forget to click it. Advent, joyful waiting. So time of preparation. This is joyful waiting. Lent is a different experience, right? But this is joyful anticipation of waiting for the Lord, who's going to be showing up in a couple of weeks, all right? And the second coming. So Advent is a time for us to really celebrate and anticipate, in a joyful anticipation, what we're called to live and work in God's kingdom, in our relationships and places that he's called us to. And each one of you is here today for a specific reason, right? You have been called to this moment. And it's kind of nice just to sort of recognize that, take a moment to do that. And let's talk about, okay, God's kingdom, but we don't live in God's kingdom here when there's other kingdoms involved, right? God's kingdom's always with us, but we have other things we have to deal with and manage in real life as well. So let's take a look at some things. So these are just some statistics, and I'm just going to kind of situate some global kind of concepts that we all have to grapple with at some level. One is that the divorce rate remains between 40 to 50% for first marriages. That's pretty high, right? And for people 65 and older, the divorce rate was about 15%. I found that really interesting. And the annulment rates in 2020s have a low range, so it's dropped from previous years. A significant decrease from the 80s and 90s, which were at the 4% level. And one of the reasons, maybe, is that there have been fewer marriages, with many people cohabiting and or having children first instead of marrying. So that's a dynamic in society that is just being played out. There's reality to that. All right, so you may not be able to read this cartoon, but on the right, we have the therapist who says, "Excuse me, it's my idiot husband." Now then, this therapist is demonstrating one of the predictors of divorce, or just simply relationships that are not stable, and it's called criticism, so we'll talk more about that. On the positive side, the stigma of going to couples therapy has decreased. So that's more acceptance. And we have a pretty good treatment outcome for couples that start therapy, couples therapy, it tends to be successful. The challenge is sustaining whatever advances you have. So couples therapy, I mean, not technology, but what we've learned from research, particularly in the Gottman research, which I'm a trained, as Bernard introduced me, I'm a trained trainer. So I've been teaching therapists this model, still doing that for a long time. We know what predicts relationship stability and instability. And so that's what we're going to be covering today. And to sustain whatever advances that are maintained in couples therapy, or if you feel like you're on a pretty good path now, I'm going to give you very specific tools to kind of take that with you. And these are the same tools whether you're married or single and in a relationship with anybody. So these are tools that can be applied in any relationship. Now this I know you're not going to be able to see very easily if you have eyes like me. All right. So families today, and it's too small for me to even read on this, families today face unique challenges in raising children and in the context of a strong Catholic value. So what we're talking about is, all right, families, but having Catholic values embedded in that family life, all right? So excuse my back, but this is the only way I can get to this. Pressures from secular culture and shifting values and norms. So we've got the secular culture and what's being promoted where? Where are we getting these values from? Inundated with social media and all of the online communities that are arising. So this is something we have to contend with, certainly as parents and even in our own life. To what degree, who will we be watching on social media and what are the messages? And even in Catholic-oriented, Christian and or Catholic webcasts and so on, there's a divergence of opinion that we have to be discerning. I think that's just the thing. Discerning and prayerful about that. Getting closer. Okay. Social media, that's what I'm talking about. Economic pressures, changes in family structures, problem substance use and addiction, problem with compulsive behaviors and mental health issues. So these are just the things that are around us and surround us every day. And as a therapist, I've worked with couples and families for a long time and recognize that there's a lot of things that contribute to the difficulties and challenges couples have. One part of it is what's our history, what's our relationship history, what's our family history, what's been passed on to me and from my family that maybe doesn't work so well or doesn't fit how I'm seeing things now or that I might want to challenge even. So family of origin is a really important place to kind of explore some of these issues. What is that I learned in my family that works for me now, or maybe to challenge that concept? So it's something to be aware of, that's all. Now, there's other things I want to see. Now, this is going to be a big ask here, but if I could have somebody walk around with a microphone, if anybody's willing to grapple with this question, oh, how about you? All right. So, looking at challenges for the Catholic within a Catholic family, there's that. Then we have a cultural component. And so I'm wondering if any group, small number of folk, might be able to share your awareness or thoughts of how your own Korean identity, culture, how that is embedded in your Catholicism, I guess you'd say. That might be different from, let's say, other cultures. Like, what is unique about Korean culture and Catholicism that is challenging given the things I've just talked about? Perceptions about social media and what the messages are, and sort of what do you feel you're up against that is a challenge, particularly from that cultural perspective? Anybody willing to just share an idea or two? I know it's a big ask, and we just started, and it's hard sometimes to step up to the mic, but Bernard will bring you the mic, so you don't have to step up. Any ideas? Any willing participants with that question? cultural components that are challenging as a Catholic family, as when it's bumped up against other values?
I think one thing from my experience is that Korean culture, I'm just thinking the difference between Korean culture, where a lot of us have an origin in, versus living here in Western American culture, is that Korean culture tends to be a little more hierarchical, right? And so even within the church, I experience, if I go to a Korean church or a local American church, you see a little bit of difference in terms of kind of the expectations and roles based on the hierarchy, right? That's there within the parish.
Mm-hmm.
Parish
Okay.
structure, yeah.
So the hierarchical emphasis is kind of built into culture that would translate into spirituality as well, right?
And I would also say, this is the last thing I'll say.
Oh, you can say more than
Yeah.
one thing. So it's quite all right.
Even within the family too, that's also true. So I grew up in a family where my father was always right, or
Yep.
yeah.
But now you're a father, right?
I'm a father.
Are you
and
always right?
I'm always wrong.
Oh.
You can ask my wife.
That's what your kids will tell you.
No, my wife.
Oh, your wife and your kids. All right, we'll talk about that later.
Thank you. Individual, one-on-one. Anybody else?
I think this may be not probably only in family, but in Catholic Church among ourselves in here, Holy Korean Martyrs, that we have a Korean the ministry and English ministry. Then Korean ministry is more like a structure, and do this, do that, don't do that, don't do this, stuff like that. And in English ministry is more like a freedom, okay? So individual is okay. You can do mass in such a way. You can stand, or you can put your hands together, or whatever. You can be a little more, throw things a little more as you will. But in Korean mass, it's okay. If you go up there, do such and such, bow this, bow that.
Mm-hmm. You know what to do.
Like that. I think those are the similar in our family, because we, as a parents, a little more want to be a little more structured, do this, do that. And children, yeah, I do believe in God. Okay, so I think those are the kind of differences in culture.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if anybody agrees
Well,
with
thank you for sharing that. So let me respond to that before we go to if somebody else is going to share. I'll tell you, my experience coming here today, I was so aware of walking up and smelling food and seeing a community that feels like a community. There's a connection here that it feels different than what I feel at St. Charles. I mean, there's a community there, but I think the cultural piece is such an important identity that I felt it here, right here in this parish. So I just wanted to acknowledge the power of culture to bring people together and to further the spiritual growth, because you're all here supporting and praying for one another, as well as the larger church. Right. So thank you for sharing that too. Yes, please.
Yeah, I think one thing that I observed over the years is that it also depends on when your parents or when you immigrated to the U.S. Because my parents, when they raised me, they didn't raise me here, they raised me in Argentina, but their thinking process or cultural process is from the 60s, 70s.
Yeah.
Right? And I was raised with that type of mentality, whereas my wife is more in the 80s, immigrated in the 80s, and then like people that are coming now are completely different. So even though we are ethnically Korean, our way of thinking, our way of seeing values, our values are sometimes completely different, right? So I noticed that that is within our own community we have different cultures within the same community.
It's such an important, such an important point. So there's degrees of acculturation too, and how soon or how long ago maybe people have immigrated here is going to bring a different set of experiences and understanding. And within a community then, as in any community, you're going to have a variety, right? And I think we can be enriched by that variety as well. But it also presents challenges, right? So thank you for sharing. Any other comments or awarenesses? There we go. Thank you.
In Korean culture, whether even when the parents think wrong and do wrong, we kind of, the kids are supposed to respect parents first. Doesn't matter. And then we think that way. And then we respect our parents the same way. But our kids, I don't know I don't know whether it's in America or in Catholic religion, they think they are equal to their parents first. And also sometimes they think, how could you do that this way? When you love me in our religion, how could you behave like that? Our kids think like that. So I think for our kids, respecting is not the first. Being equal is the first, and then love in our religion is the first. That's what I think in my family.
That is such an important point. So underscoring cultural beliefs as a frame for family relationships. And I had this wonderful opportunity, it was about 5 years ago, to go to South Korea at Seoul to present there. And it was a large group of like 400 people, of educators and parents. And that talk was on basically kids who are addicted to gaming and internet and what's happening, because South Korea has like 100% rate of like high-speed internet accessibility. I mean, that's literally a fact. So the access, and then these kids that are doing this gaming stuff, they're like superstars there, right? And so they might be six figures. I mean, they're making a lot of money. So some of the consequences from gaming addiction, I'm going to get to the point that you started with in a second, is an obsession with this thing where people were literally suffering health consequences and even death because there's one kid, for instance, who was so into gaming, he had a heart condition that he wasn't taking his medication, wasn't eating, and his health deteriorated and didn't survive. So the whole gaming thing actually presents a huge concern, right, for everyone. So that was one talk. And the point that I'm eventually getting to is I felt that respect that you were talking about, there. And it's like, it just felt different than here, where the values sometimes, and I'm making a global statement about emphasis on individuality and strength, where you're on your own, or you're supposed to be the best, or the top. And it's not a group culture. Children are rewarded, or adults are rewarded if they're showing individuality, if I can make a global statement, as opposed to some of the values that you're identifying, of community and belonging and respect, like Jesus taught us. Right. Any other comments before we move on? Oh, yes. Over here, Bernard, we're going to keep you running. Should have got roller skates. There we go.
I made you run, but yeah, well, what I'm hearing from people and that I've been observing is because the father a lot of times are very authoritarian, so that sometimes we project our God the Father the similar ways, and then sometimes it's hard to really have that loving relationship with our God the Father. So I think that's also part of the culture that sometimes people struggle with. Yeah.
That's a really good point. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. So the image or the experience we have of sometimes our own family experience can translate into spirituality in a way that can be very challenging and not in a positive way. It could be positive or not positive. And I'm thinking about a friend, a colleague who was actually a pastor, a Protestant pastor, wasn't Catholic. And he grew up in a family where the father was alcoholic and it was very negative, and there was physical and emotional abuse, basically, that happened. So it's a sad story, but that's what he grew up with. So he could not image, even as a pastor, God as a loving father. It just couldn't connect for him. And so I said, well, Mike, what is your image of God? And so whether we're talking about our family history or cultural history or the legacy from all of that, what is your image of God? Where does it come from? And what doesn't work for you and what does work for you? And so he said that his image of God was a picture, maybe you've seen like hands that are like holding a child, like hands. And that's the image he had. When he's thinking about God, the Father, it's not as Father, it's as a protector. And somebody who's there for him and can hold him and support him. And I think that's a challenge maybe for all of us. Like, what images do I have? When I think about the coming of Jesus, what images do I have of what that even is? Jesus was born at a time where there was a tremendous political upheaval. And so all of the things that sometimes the images and the cards, the Christmas cards of the Silent Night, Holy Night, and sort of this peacefulness, Mary and Joseph had a lot to deal with at that time. And Jesus' life was threatened, right, by Herod shortly thereafter. So it was not a time of stability at that time, any more than we're feeling necessarily a period of stability in our life right now with all the things that are happening in the world and the challenges and the lack of safety so many people are feeling right now. But we have God the Father, we have God that holds us, we have God to sustain us through all of the challenges, which requires us to open our hearts and our minds and our spirits to what Advent is all about. Joyful anticipation of where we're being called and waiting for not only Christmas, but waiting for the fulfillment of God's kingdom, right? So there's a lot to think about and sort through in terms of what Advent could mean to any of us from our family perspectives, from our cultural perspectives, and from all the above and other things that we haven't even thought of. I had another thought. I wonder if there's any more before we move on to the next thing. Let's see. Bear with me a second. All right, so language can certainly be an issue as we've kind of talked about a bit, within the family itself. And I had let's see, he was Chinese American, Mandarin, and he did not speak Chinese, and his family did, and his girlfriend did. And so he didn't speak Mandarin, rather. And so he sort of felt a part of family gatherings, at holiday times, but not so much, because there would be some of the language that he didn't understand. He was trying to learn it, but it didn't feel like a connecting thing. So sometimes language can be a challenge. And I'm wondering, you don't have to say anything, but did anybody experience that even in your own family where language, yes, no? You don't have to say anything, I promise I won't call on you. Does that seem like an issue? Maybe I'm seeing this, okay. All righty, so maybe that applies, or maybe it doesn't apply. But I guess the last comment or thought is sort of a reflection summary, maybe what we've been talking about already, but the integration of faith with a cultural perspective. And that's kind of what I was really interested in what is different. We know what the similarities would be as followers of Christ and waiting in Advent. But what are the differences, do you think, integrating Catholic faith from a cultural perspective? Anybody have any ideas or any willingness to share about that? Oh, we have somebody back there, Bernard. Yeah, we'll need the microphone.
If you could repeat the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, wow. And here we are walking towards you. The question is, what are the challenges in integrating your cultural perspective in your spiritual expression? How does, specifically, whatever identification in whatever aspect of Korean culture, how does that impact your spirituality? That's a better question. How does that impact your spirituality? I come from a Sicilian family, and one of the things is they're kind of loud and boisterous, at least my family was. A number of members, what I'm trying to say. And so when there would be gatherings, there was a lot of noise. Not, subtle noise, but noise, right? And even when my grandmother died, my aunt and a number of people in the family were wailing in church during the funeral, like just sighs and moaning, and it was very expressive. So the emotional expression is out there, which is probably not true for many Asian cultures, if I could say that. With that, I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying there's differences in cultural experiences and expression of culture. Like, I knew I'd be pushing probably a little bit here, trying to even ask for what we're doing right now, to just say, what do you think, what do you feel, isn't comfortable for most people. And sometimes from a cultural perspective, that kind of adds to the, I don't know, I have some thoughts, but I don't know, maybe I shouldn't share them. And that's okay. It's just what I'm thinking about is just sort of how does culture influence spiritual expression? And is there anything that you personally identify within the Korean culture that adds sort of a different element that some other culture may or may not experience? Final question, then we'll move on. Is there anything unique for you, maybe not for anybody else, but something that's unique perhaps as a cultural identity in your own spiritual expression? Okay.
I think nobody is saying anything, so I should say something. All right. One of the things, kind of the similarity, or maybe we accept more or better, is that we have something called Jesa, which is we kind of respect that this is the anniversaries. We put things on the table, put food on the table, we bow, things like that. Also, we call our mass, in Korean it's called Jesa. Okay, so there's kind of similar things, although some of that other Christianities, they don't allow that. And so a lot of respect of the elders, and even though we trying to learn more about the family relationships today, I think there are a lot of family-oriented, I think it's in Catholics in general in Korea, so that we are so proud of how the Korean Catholics was started, not from the somebody come to Korea, hey, this is Jesus, and stuff like that, but we learn, our ancestors learned themselves and brought the Catholicism in Korea. I think that we are so proud of that. I think that's probably part of that things we do differently.
Yeah, I'm seeing some head shake. So thank you for sharing that part. And to really embrace that. I mean, there's so much to celebrate from one's culture, right? And to bring that into, and that's the uniqueness, I think, and why I'm always thrilled. Like when I was enrolled in the Servite Confraternity, Servants of Mary, it was in a church across the bay, Union City, that basically is a Filipino community that reminded me immediately. Actually, that's what I was thinking of when I was walking here. It looked like the same. There were rooms all over the place. I could smell food. And Filipino food is wonderful, by the way, right? And so it has that same community feel, and the welcome into the Servite community, so to speak, included a cultural piece that was different for me, that was really interesting and inviting. So it's, again, learning from one another and to be appreciative for what you don't have that others have that you can learn from. All right, we will move on unless there's any other final comments. Or I've probably pushed it far enough, right, Bernard? Okay, so here's some ideas about the theology of family, starting with this concept of domestic church, as Bernard introduced the concept as, right? So what interesting, I wanted to start with, there's a lot of information in Vatican II that focuses on the family, and I didn't really want to make this a lecture about that. I just wanted to highlight some things that seem to be important things. So Vatican II, there was a pastoral constitution called Joy and Hope, is the English translation, and a dogmatic constitution, which means this is part of what you have to believe if you're a Catholic, right? So these are important things called Light of Nations. So if you're interested in that and those documents, you can certainly look that up if you're interested in that sort of thing. Otherwise, we can just kind of focus on a few things that the Church that Vatican II highlighted. And that is, the family has crucial role as a fundamental, and this is in quotes, cell of society. We are an important part, a cell of the society, regardless of what society you live in. We're here in this society, right? This is an important component of society. And so it's, with all the political controversies out there, you go, well, do we have a responsibility as Catholic Christians to not necessarily to be political, but the agenda of Christianity is about peace. It's about healing. It's about acceptance. It's about forgiveness, right? And there are many things happening right now that are pushing up against that. So we're back to the challenges of society, and what Vatican II, that, as I'm summarizing it from my perspective, is to say, well, we have a role to play. And what is that role? It's going to be different for people. If nothing else, prayer. If nothing else, prayer. So we all can leave today with an agreement, I would imagine, that there's a lot going on in society that is really running counter to Jesus' messages in the gospel. And all the anticipation and the waiting, the joyful waiting we have for Christmas that's coming, and the second coming beyond, is all about the kingdom of God. And what can we do in this world and in this life and in this other kingdom that makes us a cell of society that takes some responsibility for trying to promote the gospel or to promote peace? Again, whether it's through prayer or other actions, you have to decide, what might my role be? That's what I'm trying to say. In the cell, right? It's an interesting term, cell of society, an important part of. Okay, the second point up here is the family is a noble calling, with the word, that's an interesting word, a noble calling and a vocation. So what do we mean by vocation? What has God called you to? Has God called you to married life? Has God called you to a vocation in the priesthood or nun or religious life of some sort? Has God called you to the single life? All of these are vocations, and all of them are noble. The challenge is trying to sort that out and to discern where my call is, right? So I really should have started this talk with introducing my wife. Will you forgive me, darling? So this is Cindy. Cindy and I have been married 51 years. This is our vocation. Don't clap, so I'm going to get all Sicilian on you. And I really feel blessed, and we've talked about this together, so I'll take some liberties here about how we feel God has called us exactly to be together. And we've had a lot of challenges in our family, to be transparent. We've had challenges with both of our now adult children that have been very difficult. And many times we're looking at each other and we're going, I'm so glad I have you. And so Cindy might cover some of the responses that we've had to deal with over the years, and I deal with other responses. But the bottom line is, I was reflecting on this talk, is, well, how does that apply to me? It absolutely feels like a vocation. It feels like a call that God has given, and we've responded. And when you respond to God's call the best you can in all our imperfect ways of response, then we know that with the gift of the Spirit, even when we do that, which I do a lot, the Spirit might just nudge back in and give you what you need, right? So the theology, if we want to make it more of a technical thing, is that the church teaches that we have a vocation and that we've been called to that vocation. And what does that vocation look like, and what can we do to continue to grow in this area of imperfection that we are sort of born in, right? We're born with imperfection, and we just are on a constant path of being led back to, hopefully, if we're open and we can be patient, another Advent theme, is patience. Patience, patience. We live in a society, now here we go back to society, where there's a lot of urgency. You push a button and things happen right away. You look up something on Google or AI and boop, right there it is. And it's really easy, boom, 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 And what we've lost, I think, some of us, can be tapped into what takes us out of that vocation because of all the distractions and the busyness and all the responsibilities and all the shopping you still have to do and all the family planning you have to do and all the things that are going to lead up for the next couple of weeks, that, yes, we're there. We're there in the middle of all the chaos. Yet, Advent is defined as a time of waiting and patience and waiting and patience. And the second coming, I don't know. We know in a couple of weeks we got Christmas, and there's a lot of things to do between now and then. But are we also taking time to slow down and to put the devices away and just be present, right, to one another? Because it leads to the next point. Family is the center for human formation. Now that's kind of an odd statement. The center for human formation. What does that mean? And here's how I read that statement. I read that as we are called to be God's presence, Jesus' presence, in our families, to educate our children, to try to be that witness to God's love, to Jesus' love, the community that you belong in, that they're a part of, the faith experience, not only as parents to children, but I think with whoever's in your family. That faith formation, as we've got rites of initiation into the Catholic faith, and we have formal programs, and I'm in a formation program that starts in January as a secular servite, separate from the confraternity, which I'm a member of that, but this is the third order that goes back to 1232 that I have felt very drawn to, and there's a story behind that, which I don't really need to share, but there's a story that brought me to that. So part of my faith formation right now is what I'm learning in that spirit of servite spirituality, which has to do with identifying with the sorrows of Mary and the sorrows that she carried and how that translates into the sorrows that we experience day to day sometimes in the world if we're just paying attention, and yet putting our faith ultimately in God, just like Mary put her faith in God, even when she held the crucified Christ, still trusting that this is somehow part of God's plan. And so holding on to that. So faith formation is what we do in families if we can make it a part of our awareness and our consciousness. And the fact that you're here is that. This is it. So hopefully you can take some things with you that can be embedded for the things that work for you, that you like, into your own sort of formation program with one another, with your kids. And what we're going to talk about at the end of the day are resources that I'm going to share with you that can be very easily integrated. So I've got some books. I'm not selling these, I'm just letting you know about them. Maybe next time we'll sell them. What do you think? And then some digital resources that can strengthen the family. All right, it's like, oh, here's something I can do with the kids. Here's an activity. So it's really kind of interesting to think about, so the church is saying, first of all, let's summarize so far what we've talked about, that there's a crucial role in the family that we're held responsible for to be part of God's presence, all right, in the midst of what's not God's presence, which is really challenging and hard, that we have a fundamental call as a part of society to make that presence known some way, one way or another, again, whether through prayer or something else. That might be an activity or an action or who knows. That the family is a noble calling. And I'm not just talking about being parents, I'm talking about the family. Any family you belong to is a noble calling and a vocation. And if you see it as something that you're called to, like, okay, I'm here at this place in my life because that's where I've been called. All right. And that the family is the center for human formation from a spiritual perspective, right? And that the church is dedicated to the family. The church, so that statement from Vatican II is saying, no, the church has a responsibility for our formation, that they're dedicated to the family to help us, to teach us, and to be aware of their presence as a part of formation for us and what the church might be teaching us. Okay, I think we'll move on. Unless there's any, I'll say, are there any questions or comments or thoughts about any of those points? Okay. Then let's move on. The domestic church, I just love that. It's a great expression, and I'll say this again. Prayers for the Domestic Church, I'm going to talk about this later, is a really wonderful prayer book for families. So you have resources, the ones you have already and the ones that you may not know about just yet. Okay, so these are just sort of characteristics, and I'm not saying anything you would not have thought I might say. I imagine most of this is pretty, like almost obvious, really. But we have to think about it because we're in Advent. The purpose of this workshop is to stop, and you're not shopping right now, you're not making phone calls, at least I don't think you are right now, I don't see anybody with a cell phone. You're stopping and you're being present, right? So there's that. Catholic families worship together. And the power of worshiping together and being a model for that formation, bringing children up. There's a couple of digital, I call them digital resources, they're websites that give activities for what you can integrate with children, like pre-K through 8th grade. And there's a lot of these websites around. I just investigated a couple of them, and I'll ask if there's any recommendations people have that might want to share with other families. But we worship together. The power of that provides stability. So even when there's instability in the society, and even if there's instability in the family to some degree, whether it's financial or something else, worshiping together becomes a ritual of connection which provides the stability and the predictability of whatever it is, however you're doing the worship, right? Whether it's coming to Mass and hopefully doing things at home or in a community that sort of deepens that faith experience into your daily life, right? Rather than the weekly version, right? All right, stating the obvious. Families pray together. There's a lot of ways to pray. We have a couple of them today already, right? So I had a liturgical prayer out of a prayer book. And then, Father Gabriel, I got that right, started with sort of a spontaneous prayer. So there could be a structure to prayer, there can be, that works for your family, that you can also sort of look at other ways to pray and say, well, we haven't tried this. The family rosary is one of the absolute best ways to pray. And Our Lady of Medjugorje is saying prayer groups and the rosary. So here's a way of integrating spirituality within your family in a very predictable and clear way that children can participate, and there could be children's versions of the rosary as well as a variety of rosaries. Within the Servite tradition, there's a Seven Sorrows rosary, which is very different than the rosary that most of you are going to be familiar with, where there's 7 sorrows of Mary, and there are 7 Hail Marys. So not a decade, but 7. And so we kind of meditate on these mysteries of suffering, right? Catholic families are called to intimacy. Now, the first time I thought about that, I go, called to intimacy, what does that mean? So here's what I think it means. Intimacy in any relationship is going to involve, which we're going to get to when we get to the how to do all this stuff, is calling for being present, listening, demonstrating caring. These are all intimate behaviors that are creating a safe environment for your partner, for your spouse, for your children, for your family to feel connected. That I'm going to provide an opportunity by asking you how you're doing, how you're feeling, what's going on in your life, and I'm not going to tell you what you should be doing in these moments of intimacy. I'm going to be listening. So how do we do intimacy in families? How do we foster intimacy? It's by these relationship behaviors of being present. When we're in an intimate relationship with Christ, we are listening. We are opening our heart. I did a meditation this morning where I'm just trying to be open to what, like it's a great Advent meditation, like just with all the busyness, so I was thinking about that, obviously, and shared something about that. How can I be quiet and listen? What is the Lord telling me? Where am I being called? So there's a spiritual frame, but then there's a personal, interpersonal frame, not just intra-spiritual frame, interpersonal, where I'm going to listen and I want to know your hopes. I want to know what's important to you. That's intimacy. And what we learned from the research, so this is not out of Vatican II or any other resources I've been pulling on so far, what we learned from the Gottman research is that when you want to build trust in a relationship, the fastest, most effective, most powerful way is to provide what's called emotional attunement. What's that? Emotional attunement are these skill sets I'm talking about. I want to know what you're thinking and what you're feeling, and the hardest thing to do is to listen when you might be the object of what the person's not happy about. Right? That might be a challenge. Now, there's good ways to express what's working and what's not working, and there's not good ways, negative ways that can make things worse, and that's what I'm going to cover in this last talk. How to start a conversation, what not to do in starting a conversation that predictably will lead to a bad outcome. So emotional attunement means I'm willing to listen to you. Now think about that when it comes to God. I'm willing to listen to you. I may not like what you have to say, but I'm willing to listen, right? In the Old Testament, we have Jeremiah's complaint, where Jeremiah's prayer is, I know you're God, but we got to talk because I don't like what's happening, right? That's my translation. But that's that's intimacy, where Jeremiah felt comfortable enough in Jeremiah's relationship with God to say, it's okay for me to express my upset feelings, my feelings that are difficult, that makes me angry, makes me sad. And that's a very intimate relationship with God. Well, we can recreate intimacy from that relationship in relationship with one another. And I realize there can be some cultural challenges here that might play a role. Could be. Right. But the goal would be to say, I'm willing to share, first of all, what's going on inside with me. And I have to trust, if I'm going to do this, that it's going to be okay for me to do that. And to hear, to feel heard. That's intimacy. That builds trust. So if I have something that is upsetting me in our relationship with Cindy, you didn't know this was coming, did you? We don't have to role play just yet. Then I think I have a responsibility in an intimate relationship to say, here's what's working, here's what I love, here's something that's not working for me right now, and I'd like to talk about it. Not blaming, not attacking. It is demonstrating intimacy. Now, if it was, let's say the roles are reversed, so I'll put myself in this role. Let's say Cindy says that to me, or she's upset with me about something I've done. And again, we're going to talk about these tools later with very specific guidelines. I could respond defensively and say, well, you're not so perfect. Now, how's that conversation going to go, right? It's going to back and forth. Or I could respond in a sort of a dismissive manner, like, well, no, we're doing pretty good. I don't agree. I could dismiss her whatever she's saying. That's harmful to the relationship. Or I could say, yeah, what exactly are you talking about? Let me know. I want to know more. If I'm creating an environment where my wife feels confident enough to share her thoughts and her feelings, knowing I may or may not agree with what she's saying, but they're her feelings, so I can't disagree with what she's feeling. I cannot say you're wrong. That's harmful to say what I'm thinking is actually right and more important than what you're thinking and feeling. So don't do that, right? I may have a difference of opinion about an issue, but I cannot have a difference of opinion about what she's thinking and feeling. So if I'm going to create a trusting environment, it's going to be because, and Cindy's going to create a trusting environment with all our imperfections and moments where maybe one or both of us slip off the track, we get a repair and we fix it. That's intimacy. It's trusting that it's okay to say hard things. and we'll talk about how to raise hard things. Right, and one of the ways I know I've slipped off the track, this goes back, something Cindy said, this is a true story, this goes back years ago when I actually closed my practice a couple of years ago. After 40 years, I was doing that for 40 years, and now I'm just focusing on talks, on writing, I'm teaching at Santa Clara University. There's other things I'm doing some research on addiction in couples, so I'm still pretty busy, I just don't have the practice. But when I had the practice, if I was slipping off the track, one of the things Cindy would say to me is, if your clients could see you now, that was a sure sign that, uh-oh. She's telling me what I'm doing isn't working, and I'm not following, what would be a better way to do things. So we'll talk about that. All right. And so that's intimacy. Intimacy. It's okay to share with one another our thoughts or feelings, which means we got to make an environment where that can happen. So if we're not actively saying, this is not the easiest thing to do, but, what are you upset about? What did I say that made you upset? That's actually a very intimate moment. And it may be, there may be sort of an avoidant mode that we can all slip into, like, well, I don't want to raise any issues. And there might be ways where you can let things go and just kind of forget, and that could be okay. But there might be things, here's the problem with that in some instances. There might be some things that if you let go, doesn't mean you really have let go. It just means you're not talking about it. So something could go underground, and that's what's corrosive to relationships. What we've learned from the research, so I'm starting to slip into the Gottman stuff already, is that couples that either divorce or are just not happy, they're married but they're not happy, the first 5-6 years have high rates of dynamics where one of those two things have happened, of just conflict. So it's high conflict couples. What's really different is that 16, 17 years post-wedding day, the couples that are not happy and stay together but they're miserable, or don't stay together, are characterized by partners who stopped talking to one another. They've gone on separate paths, and the things that they let go and let go and let go, or there wasn't a model to talk about things, maybe they're here. Well, let's do it this way. Maybe they're here. So here's partner one, here's partner two. And now we've got something that's pushing them apart. There's an issue, but we're not talking about it. And now there's another one, or there's a big one that is never talked about. So here's what happens. They're on two different paths, and then it isn't that they're fighting. When I first worked as a therapist, I'd see these couples married that length of time, and they were very different. And I didn't understand until I was trained in this. Very different from the couple that was doing this. They were not invested in one another. Sort of, they were just on separate paths. So all of this is to point to this idea of what do I need to tell my spouse or somebody who's close to me, if not my spouse, a friend even, that maybe I can let go, or that I just want to say, I'd really like to let you know about something that bothers me, just so we can get on the other side of it. Now, I realize, and this is true just in generic American culture, that can be a hard thing anyway. And then there's sort of challenges if we grow up in an environment or a cultural frame that says these are not things you should be doing. So you have to make a decision about what's the risk if I don't? Can I let it go? Or does it play a corrosive effect in my relationship with whomever at some point? All right. Oh, I skipped this one. Catholic families put families first. Now, what does that mean? That means, I'm thinking of St. Joseph for some reason in this very moment. What did St. Joseph do to make his family first, to prioritize their safety and provide for the ways that St. Joseph did? And Mary had her role. And making the family first means I'm aware of how important my family is. And as obvious as that sounds, the challenge can be I'm working 50 hours a week with a startup, or I've got all these responsibilities I've got to manage, and somehow, it isn't that I'm fighting with you or I'm angry with you, but somehow life is one of the reasons this is happening. And I've lost sight of my relationships because I've been absorbed with all these other things that are summoning me And we're all subjected to this, right, to various degrees. So how present are we to our spouse, to our family, to God, to ourselves? Advent is a time to reflect on that. How present am I? Anticipation of the Lord, yes. But how am I anticipating this? Am I getting the checklist with the shopping, which has to be done? And am I taking time to really reflect on where I'm at with the Lord, where I'm at with my family? You know, am I present to my family? Am I present to myself? All right. So these are like important points that can get lost, as obvious as they are. And I'm not claiming to be a master in this stuff. I mean, there are a lot of times I will look at my life and go, would you agree? I think we had this conversation not that long ago, right? So there were a number of things. So this workshop was happening. Then I was teaching at Santa Clara, so I had to finish stuff that's the quarter's coming to an end. And then there was some other family stuff going on to manage, and it could be, you know, it's easy to get caught up in that. And they had to be managed, right? But in that pie of responsibilities, how big is the slice for myself? How big is the slice with Cindy and I? How big is the slice with the Lord? And that may vary on a day or a week or a period of time, as long as we recenter and get on the other side of all this stuff that we're crowded with. And this is Advent, joyful waiting. All right. Oh, a witness and a sign. All right, so what does that mean? The family is a witness and sign of what? Of God's presence. The family is the Holy Family. Father Gabriel, right, was talking about, I think he used the term Holy Family. He did in a prayer, right? So the Holy Family is a witness for us. How can we be a witness to others? And do we share with our friends and people who know us a sense of godliness within our family that just sort of is evident? You know, so you have to make decisions about people that may or may not be Catholic or even Christian. You know, how do we share, or in what circumstances might it be a good idea to be that witness just by demonstrating behavior, not necessarily evangelizing. That could be an option, but I'm not really talking about that. I'm just talking about being a witness. And one of the things I like is that, to think about, this helps me, is like, if I really think about, you know, God's with us all the time, right? But if I think about, what am I doing right now? Is that something that I'm going to feel good about later when I'm in prayer? Or is this something I'm going to be in one of those forgiveness prayer modes? You know, how am I present right now? And how am I a witness for God's love? And when I slip off the track, thankfully, we've got a very loving, forgiving God that's built into our spirituality. God does not demand perfection because it doesn't exist in us. It doesn't exist. What we have, our biggest strength as, I think, believers, is the gift of forgiveness. And no matter how many times we slip off, forgiveness, slip off, forgiveness. It's harder in relationships, but when you have a solid relationship of sort of openness and repair, which we're going to talk about shortly after the break, then then we have a way to move through those challenges and be that witness. All right, this will be the last slide before we take that break. Let's see. Yeah, we're doing good. We're doing well. All right. Theology of marriage. This is taken from, I got these ideas from Bishop Robert Barron. Anybody hear of him? He's a very popular Catholic media influencer, shall we say. And he has really interesting theological basis for all these different kinds of teachings. So I said, what does Bishop Barron say about theology of marriage? So these are his ideas that I really liked. And one of the things he referred to, which really made a lot of sense to me, is the wedding feast in Cana, is where Jesus, he highlights, performed his first miraculous sign. If you think about it, at a wedding, why would this be important? Why did, and I've thought about this a lot, why would Mary prompt him to do this, to to become the very first miraculous sign. So his mother said, do this. He rebuked her a little bit, and she ignored him, like a good Jewish mother, like, nah, never mind. Do what he says. Do what he says, she tells the folks that were involved with this, right? So what is it that prompted Mary at this wedding feast with all the apostles there? And now what we're having is Jesus changing the water to wine. Why at that feast? So let's look at a few more ideas about what might contribute to an understanding, or a version of an understanding of that. Is that Barron said this, Bishop Barron said, marriage is a sacramental covenant that is intimate, kind of what I said earlier, exclusive, indissoluble communion of life and love. Marriage is a sacramental covenant, not a contract. It's a covenant, an everlasting covenant, which is really hard when the relationship is in trouble or there's things that would make it very painful to stay in the relationship. Nevertheless, this would be the call. And so that covenant is in place, and it's intimate, exclusive, and you can't break it apart. It's a communion of life and love. A living sacrament is what's, I think is, I'm going to get to that in a second. So the sacramental theology holds that God's love has brought you together. All right. And there's a reason why you're together with your partner, or you're even in your family, or whatever relationship that's significant to you now, if that's the case. He's brought you together for God's purpose and providence. And one of the questions he asked, which I thought was really interesting, when he married couples, and they had a niece he was talking about in this particular video, and he said he would always ask couples where he's officiating at a wedding, a to-be wedding, why are you getting married? And and so what would you expect a couple to say? Why are you marrying this person? The first answer most likely is, well, I love him, I love her, right? Okay. But there's nothing about covenant in that. There's nothing about, why are you getting married in a church? Because you could be a secular person, you could be an atheist and believe in love and marrying people for the right reasons, but it's more of a contractual thing. There is not a spiritual component that says, this isn't just two people who find each other and fall in love. This is, from a Catholic theologic perspective, a sacramental perspective, is to say, no, you were called to this relationship. You were actually called to this relationship. And you are to be my presence, just like Jesus is, Jesus and the church, right? So we're married to Jesus. He's the bridegroom, right? And we celebrate, like in Cana at the Mass, there's a celebration, there's a feast where the Lord offers his body and blood. There's a feast. It's a recreation of God's covenant with us, manifest in a relationship between a man and a woman in the sacrament of marriage. It's a recreation of what we're called to as married people, if that's our call. So you think about that and go, wow, that's really interesting. And there's no theological basis, like, well, I shouldn't say that. I haven't read that this is the case, or any theologian believes this, but I had this idea that when Mary said, they ran out of wine, and Jesus said something like, well, what's that to me? It's not my problem, right? And she said, she didn't say anything more. The direction was, do something. Then she ignored Jesus, and do what he tells you, right? So now we have the inspiration, I believe, of the Holy Spirit moving Mary, and somehow is communicating this in a way that Jesus kind of starts his public ministry. And so Mary's role in salvation history is a subject of a lot of conversation right now, which are a recent document where the Pope signed a document on names of Mary, and so there's a lot of controversy about that I think just simply needs to be sorted out. But Mary had a role in salvation history, the mother of the world. And she was consecrated to the world in October by the Pope, Pope Leo. The world was consecrated to her. Which way does that go? One of the slides, my dyslexia is kicking. Which way is it? Consecrated to the world. There we go. We'll go with that. All righty. The couple's vocation of marriage becomes the sacrament. And I really like this point. I think this is a really good point. So it isn't, the concept Aaron's talking about isn't, we are giving, the church is not giving you the sacrament. The church is offering the sacrament, and you become the living sacrament. You become the sacrament. So it's not just receiving, it's now being the living sacrament. And that is so powerful, just as priests are the living presence of Jesus. You know, and now in a vocation of marriage, if that's your call, there's a way in which we are that presence. And it's a very powerful image. And kind of getting back to it, just a little note I wanted to make sure I said, so I'm going to read it. The Creator wants to marry you, share his life. We're anticipating that, the Creator arrival, you know, Father, Son, and Spirit. It's in the image of Jesus hosting a banquet, as I said earlier, as a bridegroom, coming to marry his people. So there's a lot of imagery in Cana and a lot of theological basis for understanding how we become living sacraments in that relationship with our spouse. I think it's a remarkable thing. Now, having said all of this thing, that's the last thing I have on this. We're going to take a break in a second, but first, let's get to, I forgot that. I told you I always forget one thing at least. So if you can't read that, what it says is that the couple's love is an echo of God's love for the church. The couple's love is an echo of God's love for the church. So again, we're present in a way that says, in this relationship with our beloved spouse, we are an echo, just a tiny echo, of God's love for the church, that we're a part of that community, an echo. So we are that presence. We are not only the cell in society, right, but we are actually the presence of God's love for the church in this remarkable union. And if you're single and you're not married, you're an echo of God's love in the way you are present to other people. You're an echo of God's love in the way you relate to others, to your friends, to family. So this is not limited to married people. This is based on the sacrament, theological perspectives on marriage. But really, this applies to every relationship. So you become an echo of God's love by being present to God, present to yourself, and present to others in the ways that we've been talking about. Now, let's see if we can get anybody to talk about this. So, are there any questions or thoughts or anything that jumps out in particular to you about any of these concepts of the theology of marriage and family life that includes any family, really? Any way families get created in different ways through adoption and all sorts of ways. Any thoughts about any of what I've thrown out there? How do you think we can become, whether you're married or not, how can we become an echo of God's love for the church? What are the ways? Can we just come up with a few ideas? What are the ways we can come, I love that term, an echo of God's love? Any takers? All righty. Yay.
I'm not sure what the word I'm looking for is correct, but just because, let's say, like, God doesn't punish us if we do something wrong, right? He doesn't immediately. He's patient. He's like waiting for us to, I guess, self-correct or kind of think about our wrongings. Same thing, I
No, I'm just saying, that's a really cool point.
I feel like we should also kind of wait and be patient. Sorry, wait and be patient.
Okay, this is really good. So if you didn't catch all of that, this is a great point. So if I captured all that correctly, God doesn't expect us to be perfect, and God doesn't punish us when we are imperfect. But God, what does God offer? Forgiveness. So how can we echo God's love? By offering forgiveness in our family. If I captured that right, is that right? So being the echo of God's love means, okay, that really hurt my feelings, and I don't like this, and I don't like that. And there's different ways to do forgiveness, so to speak, and so I'll talk about that after the break. But the bottom line is, do I have an attitude of forgiveness? Can I forgive somebody who says, I'm really sorry that I hurt you in the following way? And here's the impact. I mean, this would be a perfect repair that would be really unusual for a lot of us. I'm sorry that I hurt you by saying those things that made you feel put down. I'm really sorry. Would it be easy to forgive somebody who says that? Maybe. It would be easy, maybe. There's other factors that might make it not easy, but let's just, for the sake of the point I'm trying to make and to highlight what you're saying, yes, that's a good apology. I forgive you. Now, would it be easy to forgive somebody who doesn't offer an apology and it's still there? Can I forgive somebody internally for something that I feel harmed by emotionally? What about, I mean, you hear stories, right? So a person's partner or child is murdered and they go to the jail and offer forgiveness unsolicited. I mean, these are the most remarkable stories of forgiveness I could think of. Like, there are people that, through grace, are able to offer forgiveness. How can we be an echo of God's love? By having a framework of what do I need to do to forgive? Years ago, I worked in a parish setting as a counselor. Actually, it was at St. Charles. And this goes back when I first started my career. I was about 5 years into my practice. Oh my, that was a long time ago. So that was like 86. Right? Somewhere around there, 86, 87. And there was another staff member where it felt like there was just, she was like a pastoral associate, and it just seemed like I was feeling like I've attacked by her a lot. And she brought me to a single persons group, and these were, as it turns out, all women. And what happened in that little thing, when I was just talking about communication, I don't remember exactly what it was, but basically what happened is, as I recalled it and experienced it at the time, was just like constant attacks at me for some reason. Like I was, I don't know, I represented something to them, I guess, I don't know. These were, so it was like attack, 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 and the person I'm thinking about, who led the group, didn't say anything, and I didn't really know what to do at the time. I knew I would know years later, but not at that moment, so it was just sort of, buffet, buffet, buffet. So I hit, attack and criticism and negativity. I was not anticipating this at all. I was seeing this as trying to provide a healing environment. So I had some feelings about this afterwards. And I would try to, in a prayerful mode, and so here's my shortcoming, one of them, is who do I need to forgive? And this woman's face would come up. 2 months later, who do I need to forgive? It's like, not again. Who do I need to forgive? This went on, I would say, probably 6 months. And I can't exactly say, and I don't know if I ever spoke, I can't remember if I actually spoke to her about it. So what I'm referring now is, it would have been better to, I probably said something to her at the time, but if I did, I can't recall exactly, but if I did, it probably didn't make things better internally, So I think it was maybe 6 months of a constant prayer of, who do I need to forgive? Help me forgive, help me forgive. And then, I'm not saying it went like that, I'm saying it just sort of evaporated. And there was healing. And there were some other things that happened afterwards where we actually had a really nice connection, and that probably needed to happen first, I don't know exactly. But this idea of forgiveness, all of this is from your wonderful insight, is an echo of God's love and all our imperfection of echoing God's love. We fall short, you know. And that's okay, because Jesus doesn't fall short. We just step into his forgiveness, and then we're able to offer our forgiveness, is the way I think it probably works, right? All right, I think we will take a break here, because we just did that, and we'll take a break, and we'll meet at 2:45.
Yes. So we have some snacks in the fellowship hall. So we have about 15 minutes. So please do come back, because we have to finish by 4:30, because there's a mass, so we need to prepare. So so few seconds. So Dr. Navarro talked about, just trying to summarize so far where we're going to go in the second half. We talked about the challenges of relationships and families first. Second, he talked about what should families should look like, right? Talked about the theology of the family. And now the third part after the break is like, how do we do that, right? Practical applications and cases. So come back for that. I think that's a key part of the workshop. So yeah, don't want to miss it.
Doesn't work. Yeah. Excellent. All righty. I'm good, thank you. Well, that was fun. That's such a lovely little social hall. The food was wonderful, so thank you for providing that and having an opportunity to have table fellowship. We can even throw that term in. So what we're going to end with as a talk, but begin with going forward, is building healthy relationships. This is a research-based approach. Now, I'm not going to ask you a question, but I'm going to ask a raise of hands. How many people are familiar, somewhat familiar with John Gottman or Gottman method therapy? Bernard. Okay. Yes. Then, let me fill in the blanks for you. So, Gottman method therapy. So, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a prayer. I'm moving the order of prayers out a little bit here. So before I actually talk about Gottman method, I want to do this prayer with you all. So it's in your little pamphlet, so get that out, because I'm going to ask you to recite it with me. And here's what's interesting. It's on the back. Thank you. It's on the back. So it's out of order. I changed things. Probably drives folks here crazy. I changed things last night. So Saint Gabriel is the patron saint of communication. Why is that? Well, if we take a look at here, and Gabriel approaching Mary, right? So Gabriel's mentioned, I don't remember, maybe 3 or 4 times, I think, in the Bible. So Archangel Gabriel, communication. So what I'd like to do is have us collectively pray this prayer right now to strengthen communication skills, to open our hearts and our minds to the stuff you're going to get. Because what's going to happen very shortly is I'm going to go through 9 different levels of relationship. So it's going to be a lot of information. And this is being videotaped, so will the folks have access to that? Or yes, of course. All right, so there's always that. But I'm going to give you resources before I leave today that are actually in your little booklet already to give you more information if you're interested in that more information. So if we could pray this together on the back page, it's under communication, and we pray this in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And please join me on this. Saint Gabriel, protect me from miscommunication and misunderstanding. Help me to express myself with honesty and kindness. May my words be instruments of peace and healing. Saint Gabriel, I trust in your guidance. Lead me towards meaningful connections and fruitful conversation. Strengthen my voice to speak up for truth and justice. Thank you, Saint Gabriel, for your heavenly assistance. I pray this in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. All right, we're in good hands. Again, I rely a lot on the heavenly host. And Gabriel, I was praying this morning, help me with all of this, Gabriel. All right, so the Gottman research method. So here's a sort of a summary. It's actually closer to 50 years of academic research. So John Gottman is a therapist who's been around a long time, and he's well known in the field and really respected for the research, one of the very first researchers on couple interactions. He's the first one, this goes back a long time ago now, over 40 years ago, that actually did observational research with couples. So a lot of research is sort of based on, we have a theory, and now we're going to test for it, qualitatively or quantitatively mostly, to see what variables are important. He didn't start with that. He started with another person, another researcher, Bob Levinson, who's out of Cal Berkeley, and the two of them came up with the question of what predicts relationship success. They didn't have a hypothesis. So they did a bunch of things to create all sorts of data points to try to figure out what happened. And so that's what I'm going to talk about here in a second. So 40 years of academic research, and what he came up with has been recreated in other relationship labs. So there's a lot of science in this, right? So this started in '72 with Robert Levinson, as I speak, you can't read this, and then came up with, here's a kind of a crude summary. We have the masters and the disasters. So the original question was, what predicts relationship stability? And through their initial research, they were able to predict. So what happened, they had an initial, called the Newlywed study. So they interviewed these couples and had a number of things that were part of this sort of gathering data. And 3 years later, they recalled these couples, that this is all research, not therapy. And with all the data they gathered, which I'm going to summarize in a little bit, they were able to predict, based sort of retrospectively now, so looking back and going, oh, we're coming up with these correlations that are tied in with divorce and relationship dissatisfaction with over 90% accuracy. They saw the variables that made a difference. So that opened up a whole line of research that says, whoa, we're onto something here. So they continued the research and have continued the research the whole time. They're still around. And I've done a lot of work with them in terms of research I brought to the Gottman Institute on couples and addiction recovery is sort of my area of research. And so and I've co-authored some articles with them and been very involved in integrating sort of the models together to help couples impacted by addiction. And so we have the masters and disasters. The masters that are going to be predictable, they're not perfect, but we're talking about relationship stability. The disasters, learning from them means, okay, again, it's a little bit of a harsh sound to it, but it kind of catches your attention, right? So these are the couples that would kind of put him on the map. Let's back up a little bit, is that he's renowned, it's a slight exaggeration, but not by much, by talking with a couple for 5 minutes and determining sort of like the state of their relationship based on how they interact with one another. And that's a bit of an overstatement, but as a trained Gottman therapist, I was trained to have couples, as part of this very detailed assessment process, have a conversation together about something they don't agree on. And I knew what to look for, and sure enough, the interactions between them would show up, and I'd make notes, and then it took also some online questionnaire stuff that came up with scores and stuff like that. And what I learned after a fairly short period of time is that my assessment was matching what was coming up in these scores because I knew what to look for, right? And so you know, so we can tell in a very short period of time sort of where couples might be and what needs attention. So the assessment process in working with couples begins with this process of trying to sort through all that information. And then there's a feedback session that says, if you want to work with me, this is a Gottman protocol, then here's what we're going to work on. And we go through what I'm going to show you in just a moment, right? Say, here's the areas that need attention. Here's the areas that need strength. And this divorce prediction stuff that I'm talking about, sometimes couples would, are you going to predict whether we're going to divorce? It's like, no, it's not about that. The assessment is assessing what your strengths are and what needs attention. So the research couples where they're able to determine like who's going to get a divorce with a fair amount of accuracy are research couples, not therapy couples. The second part of the research was divorce prevention. So now that we know things that they struggle with, and we can see it, measure it, we can count it, now here's the tools that will help sort of rectify that, not perfectly, but to kind of put them on track with the things that work, we know work. So it's sort of twofold research. And the initial research, and my gosh, it's gone so much beyond this now, observed over 3,000 couples in research. And again, Gottman's really respected. If you look up John Gottman, just Google him, and you'll see article after article. And then I have a reference to a YouTube video called, it's in your booklet, I hope, I think it is, Making Relationships Work. And so if you start with that on YouTube, that's a start on an overview of the research and what works. And the importance of physiology, this is really interesting. So what they discovered is that when couples' physiology during an interaction starts to escalate, by that I mean it gets heated, and they literally put on Holter monitors and measured blood flow, and believe it or not, actually had them, after this, these are research couples, actually they would get urine samples and measure stress hormones. So we've got all this science underneath this. And what we learned is that if the couple's escalating, that physiologic thing kicks in, and the limbic system is the part in our brain, that's sort of the midbrain part that says something's dangerous. And when that happens, you literally, so if you're driving down a highway, let's say Highway 1, and you see an oncoming car come in your lane, a number of physiologic processes are going to happen. One is peripheral vision goes, blood flow stops going out here and starts coming in to sort of make sure if there's accident, you're not going to bleed to death. You can't really think other than survival for the next moment. And heart rate is up, blood pressure's up, and all these physiologic symptoms kick in that moment because it's survival. So if your person sitting next to you says, what's wrong? You're not going to hear them because you're seeing the car. So you're going to swerve out of the way. What he discovered is that there is the same parallel process when couples start escalating. And the bottom line in terms of interactional stuff is that you cannot think and you cannot process when you're in survival mode. So when your partner says something, when your spouse or whoever says something to you that is tapping into something that's a source of pain or a trigger of some sorts, and then there's an interaction where you're escalating together, then the conversation will not end well. If that happens enough times, the relationship starts to do this, right? So that's what we want to avoid. And I'm not talking about avoiding conflict. I'm not talking about even avoiding arguing. I'm talking about a limbic brain process that basically puts the prefrontal cortex on pause. It's just you can't access it. And the prefrontal cortex has to do with decision making and impulse control, and the ability to sort of be rational goes, because it's all about survival. Which may sound like an exaggeration, like, wait a minute, you're comparing an oncoming car that might kill me and my family, if they're in the car, to an argument I'm having with my wife or my husband. Yeah, the same physiologic process can kick in. And I'll talk more about that when we get to conflict. So this is not an exaggeration or hyperbole. This is like literally what predicts relationship distress. So you can be upset, you can be angry, you could even yell and not be, the term is called flooded. And that just means that internal process. Like, let's say I'm hearing an injustice in the world, and I get angry about it, and I'm having a conversation with someone. That doesn't mean I'm flooded and overwhelmed and that limbic system's taking over. It just means I'm angry. If there's something that trips it into the next level, then I'm not going to be able to have a rational conversation about whatever just triggered that. All right. Hopefully you can follow that. Then the love lab, that's a really interesting thing. So here's a couple. And this is actually a real picture, which is kind of blurry right now on purpose. But the idea is what Gottman did is he set up a love lab, and this is in Seattle on Puget Sound. They had an apartment. Volunteers, couples would come in and spend 24 hours there with video cameras on, which is really interesting. And all they did is they observed couples, and they looked at how they interacted with one another. And again, they did that kind of a thing with measuring physiology afterwards. And they did a thing of coding language, coding negativity, and a bunch of other stuff I won't get into. But take my word for it, it was a really intense sort of way to try to quantify and look at sort of how they interact with you. There's a quality piece to it, but to quantify number of interactions that are negative versus positive, right? And then out of that research, they were able to determine, again, what the issues are that need to be addressed. And that's what this couple's kind of doing here. And there they are, John and Julie. So what we have here is a model called the Sound Relationship House. And I actually brought a pointer that hopefully you'll be able to see. So there's 7 levels. So we've got this level, and Sydney and I are going to demonstrate what these are in a moment. And we have what's called the friendship system. So these are these 3 levels, and I'll say what each level is and what it represents. And then we have the positive perspective. Now, this is important because if the friendship system, think about it this way, the friendship system reflects positivity, intimacy, and closeness. It's what I said earlier, intimacy, right? It reflects that. If that's in place, this is really interesting to me. There is this dynamic called positive perspective or positive sentiment override. Now, what that means is that there's enough positivity in the relationship because the closeness, the intimacy is a buffer against the negativity that would happen, that's inevitable to happen. So let's say I do something that irritates Cindy. Has that ever happened? She's laughing. Yeah. All right. If we're in positive perspective, then what she's going to get is irritated with me. It's not a definition of me being deficient or there's something wrong with me, right? What I'm trying to say is that the positivity overrides the negativity. Now, let's say the very same behavior happens in a couple where there's negative sentiment override. So what happens is that the same behavior is not going to be perceived as, oh, that's irritating, or you had an off day. Jeez, I'll leave you alone. It'll be, there you go again. You're so moody. You never ask me how I'm doing. And all of a sudden, these negative attributions start building up because that's the framework. It's a relationship that's based on a series of misfires that create a perspective that doesn't allow for positivity because there's so much negativity built into what's not happening. We don't have a close relationship. We're not sharing with one another. We're not expressing what we appreciate. We're not trying to connect. And when that happens, then it leads to this negative sentiment override, which can be fixed, by the way. It just requires an awareness of what to do and what to look for that you can avoid, or you can now include a different response. And what we learned from the research is that in couples that are in negative sentiment or negative sentiment override, negative perspective, is that, so we're looking at videotapes. These are research couples, right? And so we've got what's called inter-rater reliability, which means the couples now are looking at the same video together, or separate times, I guess, the video of an interaction they had. And they're rating how much positivity, if something's positive, there's actually a rating dial in this research. So they're going, that was positive, that was positive, that was negative. So there's a rating system. And then there's an outside rater, a trained professional, to look for the same thing. When you see negativity and they're given the same instructions and they're trained to know what's negative and what's positive and what to do, right? So everybody's got, they're on board and there's this idea of, okay, we're all clear about how this works. And what they notice is that the inter-rater reliability between the outside researcher and the couples is that they see about the same amount of negativity and positivity when there's positive sentiment override. They notice what's going on. They know what's positive, and the partners I'm talking about. So they see it. When there's negative sentiment override, about 50% of the positive interactions are not accessible. You're not noticing it. Is there positivity? Yeah. Did they see it? No. And it's really interesting. And this is based not just on an off day. Maybe it's based on an off day, but I'm talking about a more pervasive sense of, there's my spouse, there's my heart's love, and then all these negative attributions might follow, And it's based on what's this overview, negative attributions. I did a couples group years ago. It was a really clear example of this, true story. There were 4 couples, and it was a basic couples group. It had nothing to do with addiction. It was just a couples group. And I was, one of the partners, the husband in one of the couples was really not a group person, and it took a lot for him to be in this small group. It just wasn't comfortable for him, but he's willing to do it. His wife wanted to do it, and it was time limited. We met for 8 times, and here's what happened. So he was not comfortable being there, which is okay. Not everybody's going to be comfortable in that situation with other couples and a therapist, sitting in a circle, right? It's understandable. So he started off, I think, group number 2 with a statement like this. One of the things I really appreciate about my wife, Catherine, and he looks at her and smiles, and then he said some positive things about her. She's a very caring mother, and I really appreciate what she does for our children, and I just want to say that. Okay. Now, is that positive? Yes, excuse me. It's very positive, right? About 20 minutes later, Catherine says, one of the complaints I have in this relationship is my husband never says anything positive about me. Now, I find that really interesting. And I'm not exaggerating. She said that, right? Why? Why is because of negative sentiment override. I don't see it. I don't notice it. It doesn't, nothing to hold on to. So the good news is that if you're experiencing some version of sort of more negativity and positivity in a relationship, the way you change it is by doing things we're going to be talking about, by looking at these 3 levels, and that will ideally, over time, patience, advent, waiting, joyful anticipation of a shift in the relationship. All right. Then we've got managing conflict, which is the conflict system. And then we have, so there's that. And then we have the 3rd level that these 2 things go together called the meaning system. And I'll go over those individually, but I wanted to just lay this out. We have friendship system in these 3 levels here, and the barometer of the health of that is in the positive perspective. So this is building love maps, share fondness and admiration, and turn towards instead of away, leads to either positive or negative perspective. This is really, really important to know about. Managing conflict, we're going to go over some of the things to not do and the things that tend to be more helpful for couples. Happy, healthy couples do not necessarily, they don't avoid conflict necessarily. You don't have to have conflict to be happy. But what conflict reflects is kind of that intimacy thing. I'm going to share with you what's working, and here's what I would like different. And so the conflict, I'm not talking about fighting. I'm talking about raising an issue and saying, I need to talk about this because it's important. All righty, and then meaning. And then, we're not going to role play this, so I want to say this right now. Gottman added these two side walls probably about 6 years ago, and he did a lot of research on affairs, infidelity, and said the Sound Relationship House explains a lot of relationship stuff, but when there's been betrayal in a relationship, then we need to address this. So trust, even if there's, so here's the concept of trust. So forget the infidelity stuff right now. Every relationship needs trust. And trust is defined this way per Gottman. Trust is, can I count on my partner? Is my partner there for me? Does my spouse have my back? I can trust. Can I trust that? So if somebody goes for a cancer checkup, it's like it's been 3 years, cancer-free, now we're doing a checkup, and then comes back, and their husband will say, it could go either way, doesn't say, well, how did the thing go? It's going to feel like, I just want to see if I'm still cancer-free. Can I trust that registered with you? And that, now there might be reasons the partner didn't say something, so there might be something about that. But it's like, do you have my back? Can I count on you? That's what that's all about. And then commitment is a good Catholic theologic perspective is I am in this relationship. I'm choosing to be in this relationship. This is the person I want to be in a relationship with. Now, those are two separate concepts. You could have trust, you're there for me, but do you want to be in the relationship with me? Or you're committed to me, but I can't trust you because you're not there for me in too many ways. This is where substance issues can come in, where the substance takes over the person's life, or a behavioral disorder could be compulsive something that becomes an actual addictive disorder, and now that becomes the primary relationship. Does this person love their husband, their wife? They could very well love them a lot, but addiction has taken over and becomes the primary relationship. And just to say this very quickly, we know that not substance misuse, but addiction is characterized by changes that have taken place in the brain where the stop mechanism's broken. So this is not willful in the sense of the brain takes over and the mechanisms that would normally stop the use are simply not in place. It's literally a brain disease. That the research on this is so clear, and I've been working in this field since '87, and the research that's unfolded over these years has been very clear and what we need. So there's a physiologic piece, neurobiology of addiction that is clearly driving this stuff, and people need to take responsibility for looking at that, but it's a biologically induced thing. Okay, let's move on. Wrong clicker. Okay, here's the application. And I said something about this in my opening talk. If you can't read it, the left part up here says you can apply these concepts in your marriage. Yeah. All right, that's kind of the original idea of the whole thing anyway. You can also apply this in family relationships. What we're talking about is how you relate to one another, and it's not just communication tools. I'll talk about that in a second. You can also apply this model to relationships with friends. And then there's a typo here. It's not supposed to be friends with Jesus. It's supposed to be apply in your relationship with Jesus. Okay. When we bolded it, it just kind of pushed over Jesus. But, Jesus with your friends, that's a good thing too. All right. So that's the application of this thing, the potential application. And then there could be sort of creative expressions in terms of how these things get manifested, how they get sort of driven into each of these relationships. All right. Has anybody heard of the 4 horsemen? I don't mean the Revelation apocalypse ones, but the Gottman stuff you've heard of? Yes, of course you have. Anybody else? Are you sure? Even if you don't know the Gottmans, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse? All right, so the Gottman says, research says this. These are the most obvious predictors of divorce and relationship breakdown. These are pervasive patterns of interaction. I'm not talking about a one-off or a series of maybe one-offs because you're stressed that week. I'm talking about it's embedded right now in this relationship and we're stuck. And here's how it works. Want to do the four horsemen? All right. All right, so Cindy and I have ideas about, we'll role play some of this stuff. We don't rehearse, there's no skit, there's nothing we've prepared per se, but you're an honorary Gottman therapist. She knows all this stuff inside out. Okay, so criticism is basically attacking the person, and it's characterized with words like this. You never, listen to me, you always focus on yourself. Never and always, qualifiers. You're describing the person. You're this, you're that. So we're going to role play criticism right now. I'll be the critic. This is a big predictor. It's kind of the gatekeeper for the other ones. And then I'm going to give you the alternatives because each one of these four horsemen, I just really think it's funny. John and Julie Gottman are pretty devout Jewish folks, and they're spiritual. They're not Christian, but they're spiritual. And he titled this The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, which is a Revelation term. I just find it interesting. Come on over here. All right, so let's say, I'll just give you a blatant example of criticism. Oh, you're finally here. You know, it's like, you never want to spend time with me. You're always working on the phone or doing a Zoom conference.
Well, yeah, and you're never around when I need you either.
I'm always around. What are you talking about? Are you on? Yep, you're on. All right.
Well, you weren't there when I wanted to talk to you the other night. You just walked away.
You wanted to talk with me? I don't know what you're talking about.
I needed to speak to you about your son's behavior.
Oh my gosh. What do you expect me to do about it? Like he's my responsibility all the time? You don't have a role?
You're the father.
I know that. He doesn't listen to me.
Well, you don't listen to me, you don't listen to him, so how could you help either one of us?
How are we doing? Why is this so easy to do? That's starting to scare me. All right. All right, so it's blame, blame, blame. What happens stay here, babe, please. You're not off the hook yet. You're not finished. I'm not finished with you. What happens is that it escalates. So another version of this, let's just say, we'll just do another quick skit where I'm going to say, your mother's coming to visit. Okay. And then, no, you tell me,
I'll tell you
my mother's coming to visit and you don't like it.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so Christmas is coming. Come on over here.
All right, well, oh goodness. Christmas is coming and your mom's coming and she's going to stay with us for 2 days.
Yeah, so? We see her once a year for a week.
I just want you to have my back.
Your back?
Because she always criticizes me. She doesn't like anything.
Well, she has a good point, some of these things.
Well, what help are you?
Well, you know, your mother's not so perfect. And in fact, you know, she's, whatever you think badly about my mother, let's amplify that by 10.
Okay.
You know?
Well, my mother's better than your mother.
Okay, that's the idea. So what happens is we start with like 5-pound cannonballs and then we move to 10-pound, then 20 pounds. What happens, it escalates. And when it escalates, what's happening up here? I'm being flooded, which means my prefrontal cortex is disengaged, and now I'm in survival. And now it's about protecting myself and my mother and whatever I think you don't like. And I don't like you and anybody who looks like you. All right, that's what it feels like in the moment. All right, so here's the antidote. So the first role play, it's like I was complaining about, I was criticizing about not spending time together. The soft start is the antidote, and the way the soft start works, and I don't have this on a slide, but the resources I'm giving you, you can find this and easily access this on YouTube and a million other places. The soft start is describing how you see things, how you feel, and most importantly, what you would like. Not most importantly, as importantly. So it's one thing to say, you don't spend time with me. That's an attack. It's another thing to try this. So I'm going to try what I just said, how I see things, how I feel, and what I want. And let's see if you can see, you should be able to hear the difference, not only in the tone, because I'm not yelling, but I might be upset. So it's not just the tone, it's the words and how it's communicated, right? Oh, I see you're off the Zoom call. Yeah?
Yeah, did you want to talk about something?
Yeah, you know, it feels like I've noticed there's a lot of time that we're both busy with stuff, and I've noticed you have a lot of phone calls, especially Zoom lately in the evening, and I miss you. I really miss time with you. And I'm wondering if we could figure out this week how to spend more time with each other and work around our busy schedules.
Yeah, yeah, you know, I understand. I kind of feel that way too, and I know this project that I'm working on has taken a lot of time, but yeah, so how about if we see if we can look at our schedule, maybe we could maybe go out for dinner one night and just you and me.
That's good. I mean, even if we went out for a cup of coffee or something,
Yeah,
or a walk
that's
would be
okay
fun.
too.
But I like the idea of building something into our schedule, and unless it's the house is on fire, to stick with it. Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so Friday night.
Friday night. Okay. Good. Now, what was the difference between the first one and the second role play? What was the difference? Just blurt it out. It was a lot better, right? Why was it better? It's fun to play evil. So the difference is I'm raising a real need. I'm not happy. I might even be frustrated. I could have said this, and I'm really frustrated that our schedules are getting in the way. I'm frustrated with all the calls you've had to take this week. And it just seems like a lot. I would really like it if we could figure out how to spend more time together. So it might be a tone of frustration. There could be a tone of anger. Like, I can't believe it. This is another night where that phone call lasted longer. It's like, yeah, I'd say it makes me kind of angry when the evening is sucked up by these calls. It's almost an attack, but not quite. So I'm wondering, can we figure out a way where we can spend more time together tomorrow night?
Yeah, yeah, I can clear my schedule and put my phone on silence, and yeah, we can spend some time together. And I'm sorry that this project's taking so much of my time, and
Yeah.
some people really have a lot that they want to talk about.
I know.
And
I know.
I know, and I understand. I'm a little frustrated with it too.
Are you? Okay. So what we're having here is, so there's a little bit more of an emotional expression with 2 and 3. You know, I'm frustrated and I'm angry. So that's not in itself, that's not wrong. But I'm not blaming Cindy, right? Now, let's say I would say, can we spend time tomorrow night? And she goes, I've got another phone call. It's probably go from 7 to 8:30. So no, it's probably not going to work because I got to take care of the kids. Back in the day. It's been a while since we've done to do that. Okay. So, or something. So there may be a way in which she's still honoring the request even though we can't do the thing, right? And I feel like, okay, she heard me. That's intimacy, right? That's our Advent intimacy, being, listening to what I need, listening to her response, her listening to my need, me listening to her response. So that's the antidote. Okay, defensiveness. You also saw that in the first example. I'll just say this. So partner says, let's say in a very nice way, it's been a while since we spent time together. In fact, why don't you do that? It's been a while since, do the soft start with that, and I'll be defensive.
Hon, I just wanted to let you know that I'm feeling lonely, and we haven't spent very much time together.
Yeah, we have. We had a date last month.
Well, that was quite a long time ago.
Well, oh yeah.
Yeah.
This is December. But nevertheless, I think it's okay. It's not,
Okay.
And I've been really busy, and
Yes, you have been really busy, and yeah.
So how are you feeling right now, Adderall?
So right now I'm feeling kind of sad and kind of like I'm not being heard.
Huh?
Yeah.
Okay. So what we have here is a defensive reaction, and there's two versions of defensiveness. One is that it's sort of a whiny kind of, I've been really busy, and it's not that bad, and that kind of thing. Then the other is a counterattack, which is called righteous indignation in the Gottman term. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. All right, so do the same thing just quickly.
So I'm starting to feel a little lonely, and I'd like to spend some time with you.
I'm really busy. I can only be in one place at one time. It's just, I can't believe you're asking me this week when I have all these deadlines.
I only want a few minutes here and there.
A few minutes is not what I have. I've got all these deadlines. When am I supposed to do this stuff? When am I supposed to sleep?
Okay.
Okay. That's going really well, right? All right, so it's a counterattack. It's like, well, what about you? Or, you know, it's an attack. That gets back to sort of a version of blame, of criticism. These are the predictors. The defensive, non-defensive reaction would be this. It's like, you know, like actually what Cindy did the first go around. It's like, yeah, me too. You know, I can understand. If you can do this, here's the golden standard. Actually, this is really good. So if you can say, if you can legitimately say, I could understand why you're feeling that. Yeah, I could see why. And I can't really change it this week because I have these deadlines. So non-defensive listening is validating. So here's the listener sort of gold standard is an affirmation of sorts. Would be empathy for the feeling. Here we go. It doesn't get any better in this model. It would be you're frustrated, you're angry, you're lonely. Here's the listener. And I can see why. I have been busy. You've been busy. The minute you do that, that's intimacy. You're connecting. You're emotionally attuned to your partner. Even if you can't change the thing, you're at least acknowledging what the partner's feeling, right? And then you could share your own thoughts and feelings. Okay, we got to move through this. Contempt is the biggest predictor of divorce when it comes into Four Horsemen. Nothing is bigger than this one. Contempt comes from a place of superiority, looking down. And that could be belligerent, and it could be name-calling, and it could be, you know, obviously blatantly negative put-downs. Gaslighting, if you're familiar with that term, means that didn't happen. You know, we see this a lot in the media or in our political situation. That didn't happen. No, it didn't happen. That didn't happen. That's gaslighting. That's contempt. Here's what really happened, right? And so this is the most destructive communication pattern of all of them. Looking down and saying, I have the truth. It could be belligerent, that is obvious, and it could be subtle, and it could be in a really nice voice, like a couple I was working with where the wife was raising an issue, their child was now 3, and she goes, you know, this is couples therapy now, not research. So the wife said something like this. She said to her husband in a very soft start way, not criticizing, you know, I'm thinking about when our son Nathan was born, and I really felt like I had a lot of the responsibility. I could have used more support. Okay, now that's not necessarily an easy thing to hear, right? But she didn't blame him. She said, this is a feeling I've had for a while, and now that we're in therapy, I want to talk about it just to let you know, something I haven't shared with you. Okay, so he said, oh, I don't think you remember that correctly. I was there a lot for you. I think you're exaggerating. Now, that could sound like defensiveness. You know, it's not so bad, but it's worse than that. Why? Because he invalidated her viewpoint and her feelings. And he didn't yell at her. He said, your feelings are incorrect, your perceptions are incorrect. And so let me tell you what really happened. I know more about you than you do. I know more about what happened than you do. It's a very subtle form of contempt. And if you have a relationship that's based on not being heard, and being told what really happened, you're not going to last, or you're not going to be happy anyway. Right? It's not going to happen. So the opposite of that would be to build a culture of appreciation, is what that says, and to, instead of criticizing the person or being contemptuous, state your needs, right? So I could be contemptuous because we're not having time together, and I could be attacking, or I could kind of get back to the same strategy we talked about before. Here's what I need. I really like that. Can we talk about it? Right? And finally, stonewalling. This is an easy one to demonstrate. So let's say how about if you do this? How about if you tell me that we need to really talk? Okay, I need to talk to you, all right? So start with that, and then go into, and it's about our finances, but break it into two, part one. We need to talk about our finances. So we're having a conversation. And okay, thanks.
Oh, so I was hoping that maybe we could get together for just a minute. I need to talk to you.
Uh-huh.
I need to talk to you.
Oh. You need to talk to me?
Yeah, yeah, I have some really important.
Now?
Yeah, I have important information we need to talk about. It's really, it's kind of critical. Hello? Darling, I want to talk about our finances. We need to look at our budget. Are you listening?
Our
Hello?
budget? Our budget?
Yeah, we need to talk about the budget. I mean, we're going to be
Sure, go ahead, talk.
we're going to be underwater.
No, we're not. We're fine.
No, we are not. We spent too much last month.
I'm hungry. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Okay. Stonewalling looks like one thing, but here's what's happening. In my role, I'm hearing we need to talk, and I'm hearing, uh-oh, here comes a criticism. Why? Might be, maybe I'm just defensive, period. Maybe we have a history of where I've experienced criticism. Maybe it's because I grew up in a family where there's a lot of criticism, and what I'm hearing now is, uh-oh, be careful, here it comes. So I'm starting to shut down because my prefrontal cortex is going, something's coming up. So what happens when somebody gets flooded and overwhelmed, they're either going to do this attack thing or they're going to shut down. And what we learned is that you can't think and you can't process, and I'm zoned out. And this is so crucial. What happens in a lot of relationships, and this is just what happened in the research, and maybe it sounds stereotypical, but what we found out is that 85% of the stonewallers in the research are men. So what happens is this comment that might come that may or may not be an attack, but the guy's response is feeling overwhelmed, and it's like, just shut down. Just shut down, and he can't think, can't process. And what it feels like to the partner is that exactly what Cindy did. It's like, hello, are you here? You know, and that's what it feels like. The guy disappears. And maybe it's because it felt like an attack or a pending one, or there's usually good reasons why. But it's really important to know when that happens, if the person feels like overwhelmed, to identify what's happening. And I'm thinking about a couple I worked with where it turns out she was a therapist, and he, I think, was an engineer, so it's a little stereotypical, but it doesn't always work this way. And then she starts talking to him, but wasn't really attacking him or anything, but then he did exactly that. Stonewalling is characterized by turning away and just no eye contact. So if we're sitting on a couch, I'm going to be looking this way. If you're here, I'm not. Cindy's going to be looking at me, and I'm going to be looking that way or at my something, you know, but not looking at her. And so he looked flooded, stonewalling. And in my office, I actually had pulse oximeters, which measure heart rate. And so the couples they're cued on, this is what I'm going to do when we have interactions that looks like one of you might be feeling a little overwhelmed. You get, you know, your iWatch, your Fitbit. You can have things that measure heart rate so you know what it is. What we learned is that when somebody's overwhelmed, that then they can't think, they can't process, and their heart rate almost always is over 100. It might be 120. So his baseline, as I recall, was typically, because we did it when nobody was upset, was 70, 80, somewhere in there. And so I had him do the pulse oximeter, and his heart rate was 140. That's a lot higher that's twice as high as 70, right? And I said, remember we talked about being flooded and stonewalling? What that means is that the guy's overwhelmed and can't think, can't process. And so what she said at the time, before I even said that, was she goes, there you go. You're tuning me out again. You know, we could do this for free at home. She's right, she could, right? And some therapists, they don't deal with it. It's like they just let it go. So what you do is say, here's what I think's happening. And then I explain what stonewalling is, no, he's very much in the room. Right now, he's in protective mode. And we talked about this stonewalling concept, and he goes, yes, that's it. You know, so it's not that I'm taking sides. It's like she said, oh, now I get it. So the strategy when somebody's overwhelmed and your heart rate is over 100 is basically to disengage, say, I need to take a break, and then you do some meditation or read a book or a walk or pet the dog. Do something that takes you out of the interaction till your heart rate is baseline. So you need to know what it is. But if it's over 100, you know, unless you have a heart condition that makes it that kind of common. Or if you're on beta blockers, which you know, if your heart's sort of slowed down because of medication, the flooding rate might be closer to 90 than 100, so it depends. But that's a big clue. So what I taught them per Gottman protocols, stop talking, do something else. Don't do distress rehearsing thinking, which is where you just kind of review the thing over and over and over and over and over, and you're not going to calm down, even though your partner's in Utah. You're still going to be replaying it, right? So calm down, then re-engage. What Gottman discovered is that when he did that with couples, they did a very, very clever study where the research couple, not therapy, research couple, were talking, they're having a conflict discussion, and they're all hooked up with heart rate monitors and stuff like that while they're having this conversation. And here was the experiment. It's very clever. A little tricky is when one of their heart rates would exceed 100, that kind of the flooding limit right there, the researcher would come in and say, excuse me, I'd like you to stop, please. And you know, here's some magazines when people actually looked at magazines. And I'll let you know when the video's ready. So stop the conversation. Just don't even talk to each other. Here, this will keep you busy. So then the researcher leaves, and they waited till the 80 mark is hit, or under 100, sorry, under 100 mark is hit, goes down. And when that happened, the researcher would come back in. It had nothing to do with the video. It was fine. That was the study. Okay, you guys can carry on. You're good. And then the conversation continued, but it didn't pick up where it left off. It stayed calm. And Gottman said it was like a totally different couple. So you will have a very different conversation if you're escalated and your heart rate's up, and then if you're able to have a conversation, even if you're a little upset but not flooded, your conversation will be very different. Okay, let's see. We're going to start with the bottom, love maps. So love maps, that's what that says, building love maps. So here are the 7 levels. Here's how you can integrate these concepts into your spiritual life and your relationship life with everybody and anybody that's important to you. Love maps is knowing your husband, your wife's, this other person's internal life, depending on the nature of the relationship. We'll stick with husband and wife just because it's easier right now. Knowing your partner's, your wife's, husband's internal world of thoughts, feelings, and ideas. How do you do that? You have to have a conversation. So we're going to demonstrate a love map moment that is not going to look like the stellar couple. It's going to look like just, that's it. That's what this is going to look like to you. Like, we're starting the day. Let's say it's the morning, and we just had breakfast, and I do this. So what's your day look like today?
Oh, well, let's see. I'm going to go and have lunch with my friend Debbie. And then I've got a couple errands to do. And then tonight is the night I'm going to take dinner to my dad. And so that's about it. How about you? What's going on?
Where are you going for lunch?
Oh, we're just going to go down to the local coffee shop down on Laurel Street. And
Oh, yeah. I like that place.
I like it because, you know, they let you sit there and chat. And you know,
Yeah.
And sometimes we chat for over an hour. And so,
Right.
yeah,
Okay.
it's a nice, quiet place.
You'll have fun.
Yeah, I will.
Debbie's a talker, but she's always interesting, right?
Oh, yeah, we always have. She gets inside your head, and she's
Yeah,
really,
she should have been a therapist.
She missed her calling. She definitely did. She's a good friend.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
So, what's going on with you?
I have a class that starts at 1 o'clock, goes from 1 to 2:30, and then I have an appointment at 3, a Zoom thing. And that's kind of it in terms of on the schedule. And I might want to play pickleball tonight after dinner.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Right. That's it. What did we do? Make it real simple. What did we do? I showed interest. Were you going to say something, somebody? No? I showed interest. I know Debbie is her best friend because I know Cindy's world. And I ask questions. Where are you going? And I'm just checking in so I know, have an idea of, even that day, what she's going to be doing. Right? It's being curious about your partner's world and asking questions. And here's the important part, actually remembering. Don't forget that part. So I worked with a couple where they were a couple in recovery from addiction, but they met each other in recovery. So there was no addiction trauma that they experienced together. And the therapy went really well. They called me 2 years later and said, oh, we're not doing so well. Out of the assessment, what happened is they stopped talking to each other. They got caught up in the world. They just got busy, right? So they were not taking the time to do this. This is huge. The conversation could be 5 minutes, but you're checking in with your partner. Now, at the end of the day, after dinner, or at dinner, I might say this, hey, how did your lunch go?
Oh, it went really well. We did. We chatted about a lot of things.
I bet.
I don't know, a month goes by and it's like we have so much to talk about.
Yeah.
But it was great. So how was pickleball?
I decided not to go anyway.
Oh, that's too bad.
No, that's all right. That's all
Yeah.
right. What'd you have for lunch?
Oh, well, I had a turkey sandwich and a cup of coffee. And
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay. We're not talking about the deepest things in life, are we? So it doesn't require in-depth, how do you feel about life?
Life is a journey.
What's the most profound religious experience you've ever had? Or better yet, what do you love about me? Okay, so what we're looking at just conversations. That means you have to be interested in your partner. That means I keep saying partner because I do so many workshops. Your spouse or the person you're in a relationship with or your family, right? So there's that, being interested, asking questions, and remembering, and building a love map. You have an internal world. Now what happens is it communicates, I'm interested in you, I'm interested in how your day went, and I want to know more. Is it earth-shaking stuff? No. The best conversations that are consistent are not earth-shaking. This is what we learned from the couples that have these really solid relationships. They just do stuff like that. So this is doable. Now, how does this translate into a spiritual practice? What do you know about the Lord? What do you know, like Bible study, reading books, spirituality, reading about the saints, learning about the spiritual world. That's a love map with Jesus, with God, with the Holy Spirit, with Mary, Joseph, the martyrs. So learning about them is a love map that you're developing at a spiritual level. And when you're in a prayer mode, you're inviting God in those moments, perhaps like a love map moment of, here's what's going on with me, Lord. So it could be a prayer of intercession. It could be a prayer of just simply, here's my life right now, or here's something that I'm dealing with. And I know you know everything already, but prayer is communication, is connection with God, and it only takes place when you take time to do that and put thoughts and feelings and presence. Or maybe it's just, I'm going to be quiet. It's Advent, joyful waiting. And I've had some really quiet moments where just things, I feel like I'm learning about myself in those moments. So it's a love map moment. I feel that could be a grace from God in that moment, which may come and go. Or it may be just, I don't know what happened there. It kind of feels empty, and that's okay too, right? So that's a love map moment between us and with the divine. It goes both ways. Okay? And as I'm going along here, I know, there's always opportunities for questions. We don't need to hold on to them. If you have any questions or comments about any of this stuff as we're going along, just let me know. Sharing fondness and admiration. Okay, let's do that. You did, and this is a true story, you did a great job the other night when we had Larry and Ellen and the family over last minute.
Oh, yeah.
And you pulled that together, and I was busy all day, so I wasn't there to really add, so I appreciate what you did.
Thank you, yeah. Yeah, I really, they were only in town for a day, and it was like, okay, I got to see who can come and get together and spend some time, and yeah, I really appreciate your thanks.
Well, you did a great job, and they loved it.
Yeah.
It was really good, because you're right, they were leaving the next day, and I was teaching that day, and then I had a meeting right before they came. And
yeah, that's right.
You're on your own.
Come at 5:30. Bob will be downstairs until 6.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So
it was good.
Thank you for that. That was fun.
But you helped on the cleanup. So
I did.
I really do appreciate that too.
Yeah.
'Cause,
Okay. There you go. That's it, fondness and admiration. Here's what I'm noticing, and here are the words I'm putting to the things that I appreciate. This is gratitude for what your spouse, your friend, your person you're close, whatever relationship we're talking about. Here's what I appreciate. Here's gratitude. Now, what we can bump up against is this idea of I shouldn't have to tell my husband that he's wonderful in this, that, or the other thing, or that I appreciate this. You should just know. I've heard that before. All right. The argument here is, why not put words to what you appreciate? One of the exercises, in fact, you can take this with you for couples, is what's called the appreciation exercise. And it's where you pick 3, let's say, adjectives of things you appreciate about your partner, your husband, your wife, or whomever, right? And then so here's a quality. Let's see. Let's do one. And what you're going to say is, here's a quality you have that I really appreciate. And here's an example of you doing that. And then here's what's important to me. So I'm going to do this for real, right? I love your humor. I just have to say, it's so much fun to play with you. You make me laugh. Like, when we had that conversation this morning, your insights are just really funny. And it was a good way to start the day. And here's why that's important to me. I think there's so much stuff out there that we're managing right now that it's just nice to sort of start the day with some fun.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate you too, because you're always there for me. You're always there to listen when I need you to. And yeah, it really helps. Some real challenges.
Now then, you got to put a specific example. Right? So,
okay.
So, I want to know how good of a listener I am. But that's true. It's like you're a good listener is one thing. Here's an example of you doing that. When, and I don't know if you have a when you can come up with.
Oh, well, when I'm frustrated with all the responsibilities, and you just listen. You're a good listener, and yeah.
Like the conversation we had on Wednesday.
Which one was that?
That was the one about trying to find somebody to help out with your dad.
Oh yeah.
And I was really encouraging that.
Yes.
Right.
And that really helped. And yes, you did. You helped.
Okay.
You encouraged me, and I did follow through on that, and it all worked out really well.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
So 3 attributions, or a couple, or whatever, no magic number, about 3. Here's something I appreciate. Here's an example of you doing that thing. And here's what it means to me. Now that is something you can do in a minute, right? So gratitude. How does this translate into a spiritual practice? This one's probably pretty obvious, right? A prayer of gratitude. Thank you, Lord, for fill in the blanks. Thank you. Now, here's where it gets challenging, and this is like the Servite spirituality is kind of coming out. Even thank you for the challenges, for the pain. Thank you for the suffering. This is a hard spirituality because that's increasing my reliance on you. And when you're a Christian, doesn't mean you're not going to suffer. It means it has meaning. If you can embrace it. Do you want it? Would you wish it on yourself or somebody else? No, probably not. But it's my experience, and what I can count on is a connection with God through that suffering. And we have a very interesting spirituality as Catholic Christians that embraces suffering. We look at there, and we look at Mary at the foot of the cross, and her presence in that suffering, and we look at our own crosses, and can we embrace that and trust in God in the moments of difficulties and challenge? Yeah. Advent, we're waiting, but we know that when the Lord comes, there's still going to be challenges, right? We know that, and we just thank God for everything. So prayers of gratitude can't go wrong. And we also know, by the way, psychologically, people who, nothing to do with has everything to do with spirituality, but the frame of reference here is gratitude is the #1 predictor for happiness. So you look at people that have struggles in their life, or physical or chronic physical stuff, and there's somehow an appreciation for what they do have rather than what they don't have, and they're happy. So one of the highest rates of happiness are found in older people. You think, well, wait a minute. Getting there, right? Why? How do you account for that? Because there's increased loss. There's physical stuff that happens. There might be, there's death. I mean, things happen over a period of time. Why would you be more happy? It's gratitude. Thank you for what I do have. Thank you that. And then fill in the blanks. So if there's a frame of reference to walk away with here, it's going to be one of gratitude for what your spouse, your children, even the challenges that come with every relationship. Look for what you do have. That's what this model is pushing. And here's what I do appreciate. And you can focus on, this is where some of the social media stuff comes in, and even the kind of the Catholic influencers, a lot of them, I've noticed, kind of focus on the negative, the negative, the negative. So at the end, there's this sense of entitlement or being riled up. You're not living with a sense of appreciation. So, I mean, there's things that need attention, but then there's a way in which, if that's a kind of clickbait stuff, is just to look at negative, because there's something about that in our culture right now that looks at injustice in a way that perpetuates anger. So anyway, there's that. Any questions? Okie doke. Turn towards and away. This is the heart of the model right here. So these terms refer to something very specific. Making a bid is any attempt a person's making to connect, I'll say, with their spouse, but I don't want to have to keep qualifying that. It means any relationship that's important to you. I'll just say spouse because it's easier. So if I want to connect with Cindy, I might want to connect with Cindy for humor, affection, just hanging out. Something's really stressful for me and I want to talk about it. So there's a bid for attention, for affection, for support. There's low-level bids. Let's say I'm a little bit bored and I'm just looking over, hey, so how was your day? Okay, and she goes, I'm busy. Okay. And I'm not invested in necessarily a response. It's just like I'm bored, right? Then there's high-level bids. That means there's a lot attached to how she responds. I got to talk to you about something that happened today.
Okay.
Yeah, I had an interaction with Matt that did not go well.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Do you have time right now?
How about in about 5 minutes?
That's fine.
Yeah, let me finish this up first, and then I'll
Absolutely.
come. We can go and sit down.
Okay. So that was really good. She goes, not right in this minute. I need, whatever. But how about 5 minutes? How about 10 minutes? Whatever. Okay. That's turning towards. So here's the secret. A bid is made for something, a connection, something. The partner wants something from the other person. There are 3 responses. There's turning towards, which Cindy did. How about 5 minutes, and then we'll talk about it. Every time there's a turning towards a bid, that puts money in the emotional bank account. So what happens? Bid, response, turning towards, deposit, deposit, deposit. Bid coming over here to me. I turn towards, why, what's going on? How was your day? We laugh. Hey, let's play a game. I'm going to play a game? Sure, I'll do that. So bid, response, turning towards, deposit, deposit, deposit. Your relationship is in the black, so to speak, as an emotional bank account, versus the other 2 relationship killers. And they are turning away, which can be stonewalling, or it could be less obvious, like, I'll turn away. How about if you just make a bid for something for time, or talk about vacation or something that's coming up?
Let's see. Hello?
Yeah?
Yeah, so we've been talking about taking a road trip, and I have some ideas, and I'd kind of like to, okay, so.
This was such a good workshop.
Yeah, it's all about you, isn't it?
No.
No, huh? So did you want to talk about it?
I'm sorry, about what?
A road trip. Okay, well, I guess we'll try another time.
All right, what I do, I wasn't yelling. I just ignored her. So turning away means not responding. Now, let's say I was needing to read this thing, or I was doing something and I'm not paying attention to her. It may not because I'm angry. I mean, it could be, but that's not usually the case. Turning away means I'm just preoccupied, or I don't see it as a bid. So let's say we're overwhelmed and Cindy's going, I'm so looking forward to this road trip. We talked about a road trip. That's kind of real. And we had to postpone it because of a number of things that happened in our life. And so, okay, that's not going to happen. So it was really important to her. She wants to talk about it. And I'm not catching it because I'm involved with something I'm doing, and I'm not paying attention. That's turning away. What does that leave her with? I'm not present, right? Am I angry with her? No. But if that happens enough, what happens is that people will stop making bids. Now there's another response, and that's turning against. So let me role play that one. Let's do the road trip idea.
Do you have some time to talk about the road trip?
Sure.
Yeah? Oh, good, good. Well, I have some ideas about where I'd kind of like to go.
Are they close?
Well, maybe. Well, I'm thinking maybe at least a day or two.
A day or two?
Yeah, so I was thinking about, going up through the redwood trees and head up to Northern California.
Come on, we talked about a road trip. That's not a road trip. That's like a day trip. A day or two is nothing. When we're talking about a road trip, I thought we were talking about like a week. Let's go someplace and spend some time and relax. Come on.
Okay, well, what have you got?
Well, you should know this. That was a little weak, but
okay.
You get the idea. There's an attack. It's like
It's an attack, okay.
Right. So what's the difference between all three? That takes money out of the emotional bank account, the indifference, paying attention, losing sight of what the person's saying, money out of the emotional bank account. Now what happens over time is if you make a bid, and it's either turn away, turn against, and the turning away is kind of a hidden relationship behavior that would not be obvious. Like it took Gottman a decade to look at these interactions, and somebody would say something like this. This is actually one of the videos. They were looking out a bay window, like this apartment thing at the Puget Sound, there's a sailboat, and this wife said, would you look at, this is a true story, research couple, would you look at that boat? That's beautiful. And the husband's reading a newspaper when people read newspapers. No response. Yep, that's a really pretty boat. Nothing. And what they noticed is a kind of a constant non-reaction to one another. One person would say something, the other person just simply wouldn't respond. Were they fighting? No. There's no evidence that this couple was like in distress. You would look at that and go, it would make really boring television, right? Just no reaction. But then these are the couples where the relationship went, why? Because after a while, sometimes there's an increase in bids. It's like, come on, I'm trying to talk. And then it goes this way. And over time, if there's a lack of response, they just stop making bids. And that's when this happens, right? So it's really important to be aware of. And you could ask your spouse or the person that you're in a relationship or you want to do this with, how do you make bids? Like this one guy said, my wife doesn't make bids. Another true story, therapy session. She goes, I make bids all the time. I make food that you love. I purposefully plan this menu because I know you like this stuff. He goes, that's not a bid. Bid is going out together and doing things. So he didn't see her efforts to connect with him through food and caring because this was what he liked, this food. He didn't see that as a bid. So sometimes there's missed bids, and it would be good, kind of we worked on is it's changing the language a little bit, like, okay, that didn't match for you. I'm talking to the guy now. As a bid, but can you see that this was a bid that your wife was trying to make to connect with you? And he goes, well, I didn't think about it that way. So, well, that's what it is, right? And so ask your husband what would be the kind of bid that you would like, And then they talked about it. So sometimes you have to clarify with one another what a bid looks like and how you respond, right? Now, how does this translate into prayer life? What happens when you don't pray? You're not making a bid, right? We get busy, right? Advent, joyful anticipation, waiting, quietness. Making a bid means taking time to sit in the chair with a candle or whatever and be quiet, or to read the office, or to make a prayer, or whatever you do, or to do the rosary. That's a bid. I'm too busy to do that. Then you're not making a bid. And what happens to relationships when you don't make bids? Same thing that happens with your whoever you're doing a relationship with. You stop talking, you stop connecting. Now, I think the hound of heaven can chase us. I taught at the seminary, and right after I taught at the seminary, this is like 2008, there were a number of things that were happening in my life where I stopped going to church, not because I lost faith in God, but because I lost faith in the church. So this is what happened, right? And I stopped going to church, and I had kind of a prayer life, and then, gosh, that happened for quite a while. Then I had a medical issue that has been resolved, but it looked like there were maybe 2 different cancers that were kicking in, and didn't know how far it had advanced. There was about a month or so when that was a lot of big unknown, and that got my attention. And then I sort of revisited, and I had been praying for the previous 3 years, and I'm not exaggerating on this either. You know, Lord, I miss church, I miss that community, but it just, something, I wasn't able to do it for whatever reason. And I'm not saying this cancer thing happened to get me back. I don't know, that's beyond me. All I know is that there was something in my life that made me sort of re-examine where things were at. And I started praying again. I started thinking about church. I met with the priest, made confession, you know, and I felt a reconnection regardless of what the outcome was going to be, of not knowing whether the thing had metastasized, these 2 different things. Now, as it turns out, they got a melanoma before it had done any damage, so they were able to excise that. And they caught it, and it was a fluke that they caught it. I'd been to the physician the day before, and she looked at the moles and all that kind of stuff, didn't catch it. I went to the dermatologist for an unrelated issue about a medication I was taking, had to do with dermatology stuff. He says, well, as long as you're here, let me take a look at you. So he found this mole that the physician the day before didn't catch, and then did a lab thing and told me that's a melanoma. And I went, and what I didn't know is how far it had gone in, whether it was going to turn into something that would need radical treatment. And so there was that, and then had this other diagnosis of prostate cancer within a 3-week period. That got my attention. And that required treatment. It wasn't a wait and watch. It was, you need to do something. So there was this period when I didn't know what the outcome of any of that was going to be. And then reconnected. I wasn't really planning to say all this stuff, but here we are. Reconnected with the church, felt like I'm back home, and whatever needed to happen was going to happen. So it turns out they got the melanoma out, they excised it, done. And then I received treatment, which included radiation and some medication, and as of today, cancer-free, right? And what has opened up for me is this spiritual reconnection. And when I was, really, this is kind of a testimony, I suppose. I discovered that Seven Sorrows Rosary. Anybody hear of the Seven Sorrows Rosary? Yeah? Okay. So look it up, right? And the Seven Sorrows Rosary I was connecting with. And then I was interested in suffering and connecting and feeling connection with Mary and her understanding and empathy and what she experienced. So there was a real Marian thing I felt. And then I looked into the Servite thing, and it's like I felt a connection there. So that started another process. So I went from being very involved with the church. I led a deacon formation program. I'm not a deacon. I was teaching them couples stuff, right? So there was that, and I was involved. I started prayer groups, and I had all this church history. I taught at the seminary, and all of that stopped for reasons. And the hound of heaven called me back. Now, regardless of the outcome of the cancer stuff, I don't think it would have changed anything for me in terms of my reconnection. It was in place. And so now, here we are. So that's the story. The whole thing has to do with turning towards making bids and making the time. Okay. Positive perspective I talked about already, and I'm just going to keep going forward so we can finish this because we're just about on time. Managing conflict. All right, there's 3 things I want to talk about here. So we know what works and what doesn't work in managing conflict. One is how conversations start, predict how they're going to end. So when you do the soft start, the first 3 minutes of a conversation, if it starts off badly and it's not fixed, with 90% accuracy, it's not going to end well, which is why Gottman therapists are trained to say, So I'd like you two to face each other, and for 10 minutes, pick an area of discussion that you disagree on, and I'm just going to observe you, and I'd be a fly on a wall. Literally, this is what they do in session. So then they turn towards each other, they pick a topic they're going to talk about, and then I see, is there any evidence of the four horsemen? Is it escalated conflict? Are they having trouble being truthful about their emotions and what's happening there? So all these things and other things, and then have them wear pulse oximeters so that there's little, if the heart rate goes over 100, go beep, 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 beep. What's that? Your heart rate's over 100. I tell them ahead of time. If your heart rate goes over 100, you're going to hear that. Just ignore it if you can. If it's distracting, take it off. So all these things we look for, and we kind of see these interactions in a way that gives me a really good idea. And so the strategy is you teach soft start. Instead of describing your partner, describe yourself. I feel lonely. It's been a long time since we've spent time together from my perspective. I'd like us to figure that out. Or it's been a long time since we've gone on a vacation, on a road trip. So let's talk about what that might look like and when we could leave. You know? And so that's what you're doing. You're stating what you need and what you hope for. You're giving your partner a recipe on how to be successful. Here's how you can be successful with me. Now we're back to intimacy. Here's how you can be successful. It's important to me that we spend time together. You know, it's important to me that we play Rummy Cube every day and that I win every once in a while.
That's right.
Right? So there's that. And then the other thing is, dialogue about problems. This could sound like a very depressing statistic. 69% of the problems couples have, all couples, are perpetual problems. That means they're not really solvable. Here's what we mean by that. Cindy and I are different in many ways, right? So some of those differences can play out in ways that could be irritation because there's a certain meaning attached to it. I can't really think of one right now for us, so I'm going to use a case where the husband, there was an argument between the husband and the wife about spending. Here's one. This actually happened during Christmas time, and it was kind of related to the spending thing. The wife complained. Now, see what your first reactions are to this. They're in couples therapy. Why are you here? They're here, she goes, you can see, kind of boiled down to, my husband bought me really cheap Christmas presents. You go, okay. And he goes, he said, well, we're here because I don't get why that's a problem. And, you know, Christmas is about family. It's about relationships. They were actually churchgoers. They were very active. Just couldn't get it. So when you first heard that and you laughed, what's your first impression? My husband was really cheap on buying Christmas presents. What's your initial impression? If you're honest, right? With my initial impression might be what yours was. It's like, well, I got the therapist thing, so I kind of know there's always more to the story. But a common reaction would be, well, that's kind of materialistic. And why are you really? It's about presents, about money? Would be a kind of a common kind of reaction, right? But then here's the story. Here's the story. And why couples get stuck on things that they go, why are we arguing about this? It's silly. The story is that she grew up in a relatively poor family in Puerto Rico. And for Christmas, her father would give the mother a really nice gift of some kind. And she and her sister got really, she said, one year I say, take turns. Say, take turns, right? Simple, right? Here's the problem. She grew up in a family where she and her sister were given household responsibilities by the mother that required vacuuming, dusting, dishes. Every day they had to do something. And the boys got to do yard work once every 2 weeks. That was their responsibility. So she grew up with a sense of injustice in the family that the two of them, she and her sister, had to do this work every day like they're in this hub. And then these boys really didn't have to do much of anything, right? So that's her position. The guy, and this is a true story, the guy grew up in a family where his father was alcoholic, emotionally abusive, and he and his brother were assigned chores on Saturdays when he wanted to play with his friends and play baseball or whatever the kids wanted to do. They couldn't be part of that. So the father especially used chores as punishment. Here's the key. So when she hears him say, you take out the garbage, what is she hearing? She's hearing injustice. She's re-feeling. The amygdala and the hippocampus in the brain have feeling memories, and when there's an event out there that reminds me of something I felt back here in this history, my emotions are going to be rekindled. What I felt back then is what I'm feeling right now. That's what happens in the brain. So the reality for her in that moment is, this is not fair. An outside observer would go, yeah, it is. You know, you take out the garbage. But when you're actually understanding why they're stuck, there's that. When he heard her say, you take out the garbage, what he heard was not injustice as much as punishment, right? It isn't about taking out the garbage, it's about you telling me to do something I really don't feel like doing. And a sense of deprivation, whatever it is. So they weren't really talking about who's taking out the garbage. They were talking about injustice, and they were talking about punishment. That's where couples get stuck. That's gridlocked. And the only way around gridlock, so you're arguing over stuff, it's like, why is this important? There's a story that hasn't been told. That's the point, is that there's something underneath this that is feeling and pushing the direction that this person's going that has very little to do necessarily with what they think they're talking about. It's down here. That is a key finding, a gridlock problem. All right, now how do we translate that into spiritual language? Where am I stuck in my life, Lord? And why is it? Why is it you didn't let me get this job? Why is it I needed that job? And it might be kind of complaining and all that kind of stuff. And let's put this in the context of two people. I didn't get the job, and it was really important to me to get it. The person number one maybe grew up in a family where this person was told you're not going to be successful, or there was some emphasis on being the top of something, of everything. And so when I didn't get this job, this feels like maybe I'm translating that I'm having a hard time seeing God as Father. Maybe there's that. I'm feeling this is negative. I'm being punished, as you were pointing out earlier. It's not about punishment, right? This other person says, I didn't get the job, and I'm disappointed, but God has another plan for me. So I'm not going to be stuck in my relationship with God feeling I'm being punished, or that somehow we're at this impasse. God is good. So I may not understand why this is happening and why I didn't get it, but I have to trust that something else will happen that is the right thing. When I first wanted to get into teaching, I was putting applications here and there and there and everywhere, community colleges and universities and stuff like that. And nothing was happening. I finally said, okay, fine, never mind. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And I kind of let go. And on the way home from a vacation that we were taking, I got a call or a message that there was an opening at the seminary for teaching, and would I be interested? And I had no idea how I even got this phone call. It was like, it opened up. So I could be sort of stuck in this pattern that I want this and it's not happening, and why am I not getting this? And that's hard to let go of, Like it's good to be one to be a teacher and all that. There's nothing wrong about that, except my frame was I'm trying to make it happen and it's not, so I'm angry. Versus letting go. This is the spiritual path that I learned at the time. All right, we're going to wrap it up in just a minute before Q&A because we got to get out of here. A hard stop at 4:30. Okay, making life dreams come true. What this is what is your dream? What's important to you? What is it? What is it? Sometimes we get a little caught up in the world or the life or the family and we lose ourselves. What are the things that are important to me? And what am I doing? Especially if it feels like a call, meaning God has a plan for us, right? So what is the plan? What is the call? What is the vocation? What is it? What's important to me, and what can I do to put in place to see if that happens? Now, the teaching thing at the seminary happened, not because I applied to the seminary, but because somehow, I don't even know how Michael Neary got my name, to be honest with you. But it might have been because of action I'd taken over here. Maybe not. I'm not quite sure. But the idea is putting into place the things that we try to do. And at the end of the day, we recognize, well, I'm not Jesus. All I can do is put in what I can and then trust God that it'll be right. That's it. And I think that's what this is all about, is trying to make life dreams come true means I'm trying to put myself in a position where that can happen. Then, if we put this into spiritual terms. What would that mean? I think it's just kind of offering up. I think it's okay to offer up, Lord, I would love to have this happen. Your will, not mine. Now, this is going to, I'm debating about whether to say this, but I think I'm probably going to say it because I said I'm debating about saying this. So, after sort of the spiritual renewal, and I got involved with the Servites, I really felt this draw to be wanting to be involved in giving retreats, and I've given a million couples workshops, non-spiritually oriented, non-Catholic oriented, just the Gottman stuff, right? And they're good; it's good stuff, but it wasn't what where my heart was leading me. So I'm thinking, I would love, if it's your will, to do retreats, workshops that involve this sort of stuff. And within a week, I got an invitation from San Jose Diocese to be a presenter for Family Life Ministries, to give 2 talks. One of them was struggles that families have, so some of the slide deck overlap, just a few. And then another about communication tools of what we're kind of covering today. And then from there, may I say this, our connection? Okay, so Bernard was there and other folks who saw me and then invited me to do this presentation. The same week, I got an invitation from my pastor to do an Advent retreat. I said, you're too late, because you were first. And then I said, well, how about Lent? Now, this is within several weeks. This is it's pretty remarkable, right? Now, I'm not claiming anything other than it's just remarkable, and there's plenty of prayers that I've made that haven't been so directly, it just doesn't happen frequently. So I'm a little embarrassed almost, but I'm saying, what's your heart? Where's your heart pulling you in? And maybe it's not just your heart. Maybe it's the Spirit that's driving. So you have to kind of discern, if this is you, then it'll happen. If it's me and not you, and that's not the plan, then I can accept that. Right? So that's the spiritual piece I think I'm aware of. And finally, creating shared meaning. Here's where your spouse or the significant other of some relationship comes in. What can we create together that gives us both meaning? So Cindy has her own life and interest in things that are her things. I'm a drone pilot. I love doing that. And a few other hobbies. I play music and do things. And so we have our separate lives in terms of those areas, but then we've got something that we're sharing together that gives us meaning and purpose. And this is really core. So what are you doing in your relationship that develops meaning and purpose in a ritual of connection? How you celebrate the holidays? How do you celebrate your anniversary, if you have one? Or your birthdays? What are the things that we can predictably do? We know what to expect that gives us connection and meaning together. That's the overview of the whole thing. How does that translate into a spiritual frame? I think it's what we're called to. That's our vocation. What gives me meaning is what I get from you, Lord. And I'm going to trust that whatever that call is, whether it's being single or married or whatever my circumstances or my vocation is, I'm going to trust that that is okay and I'm right where I should be right now. And that's that shared meaning. And you're all here with a sense of shared meaning. We have joyful waiting that all of us are in now, right, for the next several weeks. So there's a shared connection and community, and all this stuff kind of transcends at so many levels. These levels overlap with one another. It's not structured as a linear model where you do this and then that. It's more like a mobile where one thing affects the other. So there's all of that. Now, I think I'm going to stop there, especially when I saw Bernard do this again.
All right, thank you. I think we have a few minutes for questions, if that's okay, Dr. Navarra.
Sure.
So I'll start off with a couple questions, and while you guys are thinking, you may have specific questions. Feel free to think about that. Raise your hand if you have a question. But first of all, you talked about emotional accounts. Can you talk a little bit? Can you give us a little more framework about how emotional accounts work?
The emotional bank account would mean every interaction, every bid is the smallest unit of intimacy that can come and go. Here's a bid. You feeling okay?
Yeah, how you doing?
I'm good. Okay. Here we go. There's a connection. deposit. It's that simple. Small little interactions, and every time you respond to a bid, emotional bank account builds positivity. And that becomes an insulator against the negativity that's inevitable.
Are positive activities and negative activities equal in your mind?
What do you mean by
It's
negative?
like if I do one nice thing for my wife versus one negative thing,
Okay. The general answer is that what Gottman measured is a 5-to-1 ratio of positive to negative. So if there are 5 positive interactions, that will offset the 1 negative. Now, you get a little cush, so as imperfect as I am, I get away with a lot, right? Because there's enough positivity that we have.
So got to be careful of negative behavior.
Well, they're going to happen. I mean, negative interactions are going to happen, and negative interactions will initiate a negative interaction from the partner.
Yeah,
but it might just end there. I just wrote a blog on this, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. That explains a lot. I have to get flowers and things like that to make up for things. Okay. One other question I had was, oh, my wife is right there. She's one question I had was the bids. Is there how many bids should I or should anyone look to do in a 24-hour period? Is there a benchmark in terms of?
There's a benchmark for responses, not necessarily the number of bids. Honestly, we make bids all day long. I'm not thinking anything, just connecting, right? Mm-hmm. But here's the thing, is that partners that respond to, who are not happy, where the relationship's not happy, only respond to bids 33% of the time, as opposed to the couples on a stable relationship will respond positively to bids something like almost 90% of the time. So 9 out of 10 times, you're responding in a way that the partner feels heard. So it's not how many bids you make necessarily, although that is important. I don't know any numbers about how many you should make. I mean, I'm walking by Cindy. Hey, that's a bid. Mm-hmm. So,
So responses that are important.
Yeah.
Great. Any questions?
I have a question about the relationships. For example, I'm a wife and I have a husband, and then we are very different. And one person can be very emotional and the other is not. In that case, non-emotional person should give more effort to the emotional person.
Okay, that's a great question. So what we discovered, there's a concept in the Gottman language that looks at what's called meta-emotion communication. Meta-emotion. It's the feeling you have about feelings. So one partner, at one end of the continuum is somebody who's emotionally expressive, and you're comfortable with emotional expression, so-called emotionally intelligent, so you know what you're thinking and feeling, and maybe kind of tuned in to other people. At the other end of the continuum, not so much, right? So this isn't to say one's necessarily better than the other. It's more like I'm uncomfortable with emotion, so I'm not going to be emotionally expressive. What can happen is that the emotionally expressive person sees this person as withdrawn and not interested. The less emotionally expressive person could see their partner as overbearing and always complaining. It's like, I never match what you want, it seems. So what's important is to say there's a difference in emotional expression that can create some gridlocky-like issues in a relationship, and the way you can deal with that is to talk about it, and to say, well, what did you learn about emotional expression in your family? And there could be cultural things, but even within cultures, there's difference. There could be any family is going to have their own culture, regardless of the broader concept of culture. So there's that, and to start with that, and to kind of honor your partner's, your husband, your wife's differenceness, and say, well, my wife's simply more verbal and more emotionally expressive. And so there's a level of acceptance, I think, for that, and then try to bridge the gap a little bit. So I don't really have a solid response to that other than just knowing that that difference is normal. And it can create problems, but once you know what it is and accept it, then I think you try to work towards each other a little bit more. I think that's probably the best I can come up with. Yeah.
We had one more question.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have a question.
Oh,
So
yeah.
you had an example of a couple with a man being emotionally flooded, and in the lab environment, they had in a way, help for disengage and break because the researcher came in and we stopped arguing and did the magazine. But in real life, if you're already kind of having the emotional elevation, it's at that point you're already flooded and you're not really thinking clearly. Is there any kind of tips that you kind of give and how to disengage and take a
Yeah.
break?
There's a workshop called Art and Science of Love. It's a Gottman workshop, and it's a planned curriculum. And in that, we help couples do this. When one of you is flooded, come up with an agreement of what a signal would be, like this or that. And when that signal's given, verbally or non-verbally, you both agree that the conversation's going to stop, and you do the thing I said earlier, and that is deep breaths or anything other than thinking about how unreasonable your partner is. You focus on just relaxing. Then when look at your heart rate, when it's slow enough, whoever calls for that signal, it's like, I need to stop, is responsible to come back and say, okay, I'm ready to have that conversation because I'm calmer. To talk that, I just simply ask you, I'd like to start that conversation again. Is this okay with you? No, I'm still not ready. Okay, you let me know when you are, and then we'll try it again. I mean, there's no other way to do it, really. It's to say, I'd like to try this again. How about it? Yeah. You're stating what you need. There we go.
Okay, I think that's about the time that we have. So, but I think if you have a few minutes, we have to leave the sanctuary. So I'd like to invite everybody back to the fellowship hall just to hang out.
Okay.
And there's some refreshments still, I think, yeah, left, so you can enjoy that. And if you have
Hurt or scandalized, find ready comfort and healing. Hurt or scandalized, find ready comfort and healing. Holy Family of Nazareth, make us once more mindful of the sacredness and inviolability of the family and its beauty in God's plan. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, graciously hear our prayer. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Navarro, and thank you for coming and sharing your gifts and insights for us. So thank you very much. And with final blessing, Father Gabriel will bless us.
Thank you, Dr. Navarro, for coming. Sorry. And usually we gauge the successfulness of the retreat or the talk or the lecture by the length of confessions or penitence. So if there's a lots and lots of penitence, I'm going to blame it on you. Kidding. I'm pretty sure everybody had a very fruitful and very enriching moment through your wonderful lecture. Sorry that I could not make it. Please stand. The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
May Almighty God bless all of you who are gathered here, the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Amen. Go in peace. Thanks
Be to God.
All right, thank you, everyone. If I could have someone help me reconfigure the church, that'll be great. And then please stop by the fellowship hall. And we'll be sending some resource materials to your email. So if you're interested in following up, you'll get that. Thank you.